I walked into my house early and followed the trail of his clothes to our bedroom. Her moans echoed through the walls, each one cutting deeper than the last. I didn't interrupt. I just stood there quietly letting them finish, because the real ending belongs to me. The trail started at my front door and ended at my marriage. Men's size 12 Italian leather shoes kicked carelessly aside. Navy blazer draped over the banister like a surrender flag. White button-down twisted on the third step. I followed each piece of evidence up my own staircase, the Morrison deal celebration forgotten as I climbed toward the sounds coming from our bedroom. Emma's voice carried through the walls, breathless and desperate, calling out David's name in ways I hadn't heard in years. I reached our bedroom door and froze, hand hovering over the handle while passion exploded just inches away. Her moans echoed through the house, each one cutting deeper into my chest. But I didn't burst through that door. Instead, I backed away quietly and let them finish. Because the real ending to this story belonged to me. My briefcase slipped from my shoulder, landing with a muffled thud on the hallway carpet. Inside it, champagne bottles waited to celebrate the Morrison acquisition that had just made me the youngest senior partner in Blackstone and Associates history. 7 figures in bonus money sat in my account, enough to fund the surprise anniversary trip to Tuscany I'd secretly booked that morning. The confirmation email was still open on my phone, villa reservation glowing on the screen while my sister's voice reached a crescendo behind our bedroom door. Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing these stories that matter. If you believe that justice and loyalty still matter when betrayal strikes closest to home, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need to hear this. Now let's see how this unfolds. I backed down the hallway on silent feet, muscle memory guiding me past the family photos that lined our walls. David and me at our law school graduation. Emma as my maid of honor, radiant in pink silk. The 3 of us last Christmas, arms wrapped around each other like we'd never let go. Every smiling face now felt like evidence of an elaborate deception I'd been too trusting to see. The guest bathroom became my sanctuary. I locked the door and sat on the marble vanity, phone trembling in my hands as I opened the voice recording app. The sounds from upstairs carried clearly through our old Victorian's thin walls. Emma's breathless whispers. David's deep groans. The rhythmic creaking of our bed frame, the same frame we'd picked out together on our 3rd anniversary. 2 minutes and 37 seconds. That's how long I recorded before silence fell upstairs. 2 minutes and 37 seconds of documented evidence that would change everything. My reflection stared back from the vanity mirror. Rebecca Stone, corporate law shark. The woman who'd just closed the most complex merger deal in Chicago this year. My charcoal suit was still perfectly pressed, lipstick unsmudged, not a hair out of place. I looked exactly like the successful attorney who'd left the office an hour ago, riding high on professional triumph. But behind my eyes lurked something colder, more calculating than the woman I'd been that morning. The floorboards creaked overhead as they moved around our bedroom. Soft voices drifted down, too quiet to make out words but intimate in their tone. I checked the time on my phone. 3:42 p.m. David wasn't supposed to be home until after 7. His Tuesday client presentations with Henderson Industries always ran late, or so he'd told me for the past 6 months. 6 months. The timeline crystallized in my mind with mathematical precision. Emma's sudden interest in fitness classes near David's office. Her new wardrobe of expensive lingerie she'd modeled for me during our shopping trips. David's increased travel schedule and late nights. The distance that had crept into our conversations, the way he'd started checking his phone constantly during dinner. All the pieces I'd dismissed as normal marriage evolution suddenly formed a clear pattern. They'd been planning this for months, meeting in hotels, texting during family dinners, laughing at private jokes while I sat obliviously beside them. The guest bathroom's window overlooked our backyard, where David had spent last weekend building Emma a pergola for her new apartment's patio. Just helping my sister-in-law, he'd said, sweating in the October heat while I brought them cold drinks. They'd worked side by side for hours, hands brushing as they passed tools, sharing smiles that now carried entirely different meaning. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. Congratulations on Morrison. The partners want to take you to dinner at Lou Bernardine. Can you make 7 p.m.? I stared at the message, remembering how I'd planned to decline any celebrations tonight. How I'd wanted to rush home and surprise David with champagne and Tuscany reservations. How I'd imagined his face lighting up when I told him about our romantic week in the same region where we'd honeymooned 8 years ago. Instead I typed back, "Absolutely. See you there." Footsteps moved across our bedroom floor above, followed by the sound of our shower turning on. They were cleaning up, erasing evidence, preparing to pretend this never happened. Emma would probably drive home to her apartment, text me later about coffee plans and sister gossip. David would arrive downstairs in 20 minutes, kiss my cheek and ask about my day while the scent of my sister still lingered on his skin. But I wouldn't be here for their performance. I wouldn't sit through dinner making small talk while they exchanged knowing glances. I wouldn't pretend not to notice the flush in Emma's cheeks or the satisfaction in David's smile. Instead, I would go celebrate my professional triumph with colleagues who respected my mind and valued my integrity. I would toast my success while planning their destruction with the same methodical precision I used to dismantle opposing arguments in court. The shower water stopped running. Voices murmured behind our bedroom door, followed by the soft sounds of dressing. I slipped out of the guest bathroom and down the back staircase, moving through my own house like a burglar avoiding detection. In my study, I opened my laptop and began documenting everything. Screenshots of David's credit card statements I'd never thought to examine closely. Photos of the clothing trail with timestamps. The voice recording uploaded to cloud storage with multiple backup copies. Evidence that would hold up in any court, personal or professional. Emma's car started in our driveway just as I finished creating the file folder labeled Divorce Proceedings Adultery Documentation. Through my study window, I watched her BMW pull away, my sister driving off without a backward glance at the house where she'd just destroyed her own family. David's footsteps echoed through the kitchen, followed by the sound of him starting coffee. Normal sounds of a normal afternoon, as if the last hour had been just another Tuesday in our ordinary marriage. But there was nothing ordinary about what came next. Because while they'd been upstairs writing the end of our relationships, I'd been downstairs planning the beginning of their consequences. The real ending to this story belonged to me. And I was about to make sure it was one they'd never forget. The coffee maker gurgled in the kitchen while I opened David's laptop in my study. His password hadn't changed in 3 years, Emma's birthday, ironically enough. The screen illuminated with his email inbox, browser history, and shared cloud storage that I'd helped him set up for work efficiency. What I found there would redefine efficiency entirely. His Chase credit card statements loaded first, months of transactions I'd never bothered checking since we maintained separate business accounts. Palmer Hotel, every Tuesday for the past 6 months. $247 each visit. Room service charges followed champagne, chocolate-covered strawberries, late checkout fees. The Henderson Industries meetings that supposedly kept him out until 9 were actually 2-hour hotel stays that ended by 5. I cross-referenced the dates with my calendar. Every Tuesday I'd worked late preparing for the Morrison acquisition. David had been 3 miles away in a luxury suite with my sister. March 15th. I'd stayed until midnight reviewing contracts while they celebrated Emma's promotion with champagne and room service. April 22nd. I'd skipped dinner to prepare depositions while they ordered dessert to share between Egyptian cotton sheets. The Marriott downtown showed similar patterns on different days. Thursday afternoons when David claimed client dinners. Weekend mornings when he said he was playing golf with Marcus. Even a weekend getaway to Madison that coincided with Emma's supposed yoga retreat. They documented their entire affair through expense accounts and location services. My fingers moved mechanically across the keyboard, screenshotting evidence with legal precision. Each image saved with timestamps, each receipt categorized by date and location. 6 months of betrayal reduced to a digital paper trail that would be admissible in any court. David's browser history revealed searches that made my stomach clench. Best weekend getaways near Chicago. Romantic restaurants downtown. Anniversary gifts for her. He'd been planning romantic gestures for Emma while forgetting our actual anniversary was next week. The jewelry website bookmark showed earrings he'd never bought me, the spa package reservations meant for hands that weren't mine. But it was Emma's social media that painted the clearest picture. Her Instagram showed fitness classes at the gym 6 blocks from David's office, tagged locations I'd never heard her mention. Coffee shop check-ins during my work hours, restaurant visits on days she told me she was too busy for lunch. Her new wardrobe suddenly made perfect sense. Designer dresses she'd modeled for me during shopping trips, asking my opinion on colors and styles meant to seduce my husband. 3 blocks away. That's where Emma had rented an apartment under her maiden name, Emma Charlotte instead of Emma Mills. Property records showed a 6-month lease signed the same week David's hotel visits began. She'd been playing house with my husband while asking me for relationship advice about some mysterious man she was taking things slow with. The cloud storage revealed David's text messages, automatically synced from his phone. Months of conversations between Henderson client and Emma M. that read like love letters disguised as business correspondence. Tuesday strategy session confirmed meant hotel reservations. Need to review portfolio details, was code for I miss you. Client wants extended consultation, translated to spending the entire afternoon in bed. My phone buzzed with a text from the real Henderson Industries. Looking forward to continuing our project discussions next quarter. Thanks for the excellent presentation last month. When David claimed to be in weekly meetings with them, the actual client had only met with him once. Coffee grew cold on my desk as I dug deeper into David's professional deceptions. Email chains with Marcus showed increasing frustration about David's unavailability during crucial client meetings. Missed deadlines blamed on Henderson account demands that didn't exist. Project delays attributed to client revisions that were never requested. But the most damaging evidence sat in a folder labeled Personal Insurance. Photos taken by the private investigator I'd hired 3 weeks ago, when David's behavior finally triggered my attorney instincts. Images of them entering the Palmer Hotel together, Emma's head on David's shoulder in his car, their kiss outside her secret apartment building. 24 pictures total, date-stamped and geo-tagged, documenting their affair with courtroom-quality precision. I'd suspected something after Emma started asking detailed questions about divorce law during our coffee dates. Her curiosity about prenuptial agreements, property division, spousal support seemed academic at the time. Now I understood she was researching my vulnerabilities, gathering intelligence for their eventual plan to leave me. The investigation deepened as I accessed Emma's business contracts through our firm's client database. Her influencer endorsements included morality clauses with every major brand. The wellness company that sponsored her fitness content, the lifestyle brand that featured her family-friendly image, the skincare line that marketed her as the trustworthy sister figure, all contained reputation protection language that her affair would violate. David's employment contract revealed similar vulnerabilities. His marketing firm specialized in family-oriented brands, with ethics clauses that prohibited behavior damaging to client relationships. His affair with a client, because Emma's lifestyle brand used their services, represented multiple professional violations that could terminate his partnership immediately. The pieces connected with mathematical precision. David had compromised his professional ethics by conducting an affair with a client, creating conflict of interest violations and potential lawsuits for his firm. Emma had violated her endorsement contracts by engaging in behavior that damaged her family-friendly brand image. Together they'd created enough legal exposure to destroy both their careers. My laptop screen filled with organized folders. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, text message screenshots, private investigator photos, contract violations, professional ethics breaches. 6 months of their deception categorized and documented with the thoroughness that had made me Blackstone's youngest senior partner. David's footsteps approached the study door just as I closed the final folder. His coffee mug clinked against the doorframe as he peered inside, shirt perfectly pressed, hair still damp from the shower he'd shared with Emma 20 minutes earlier. "Hey babe. Didn't expect you home so early," he said, voice carrying the casual tone of a man who believed his secrets were safe. I minimized the browser windows and smiled at my husband, the same smile I used with opposing counsel right before delivering devastating cross-examinations. Morrison deal closed ahead of schedule. Thought I'd come home and celebrate with my loving family. The word family hung between us, loaded with meaning only I understood. David smiled back, completely unaware that his celebration was about to become his funeral. Because while he'd been upstairs compromising his marriage, I'd been downstairs building the case that would end everything he'd worked to build. The evidence was complete. The investigation was finished. Now came the part I'd trained my entire career for. The systematic destruction of my opponents using nothing but facts, documentation, and the devastating power of truth. Celebrating sounds perfect, David said, settling into the chair across from my desk. Maybe we could open that bottle of Dom Perignon we've been saving? Order takeout from Chez Laurent. I kept typing on my laptop, fingers moving across keys that pulled up files he couldn't see from his angle. Actually, I think we should wait for Emma. She'll want to hear about the Morrison deal too. His coffee mug paused halfway to his lips. Emma? Why would she care about your work stuff? Oh, I think my sister cares about a lot of things that happen in this house. I closed the laptop with deliberate precision and stood, smoothing my skirt. In fact, I'm sure she'll be down any minute. David's eyes followed my movement toward the kitchen, confusion flickering across his face. He had no idea Emma was still upstairs, probably fixing her makeup in our guest bathroom, preparing to sneak out the back door like she had dozens of times before. The wine cabinet held a bottle of Malbec I'd been saving for a special occasion. This certainly qualified. I uncorked it slowly, letting the sound echo through the house, then poured 3 glasses. Red wine seemed appropriate for what was about to unfold. Becca, you're acting strange, David called from the study. Is everything okay? Everything's about to be perfect, I replied, carrying the glasses into the living room and setting them on our coffee table. 3 glasses arranged in a triangle, like the toxic relationship they represented. Footsteps creaked on the upstairs floorboards, Emma trying to move quietly across our bedroom. She'd probably spent the last 10 minutes erasing evidence, smoothing our bedspread, spraying air freshener to mask the scent of their afternoon together. But she couldn't erase the digital trail I'd already documented. David appeared in the living room doorway, drawn by the wine setup. 3 glasses? Are we expecting someone? We're expecting honesty, I said, settling into my favorite armchair with clear sight lines to both the front door and the staircase. Something this house hasn't seen in 6 months. The color drained from his face like water from a broken glass. He opened his mouth to respond just as Emma's footsteps reached the main staircase. She was trying to sneak out, but our old Victorian's wooden steps betrayed every movement. Emma, I called sweetly. Could you join us in the living room? I have wonderful news to share. The footsteps stopped completely. Silence stretched between all 3 floors of our house like a tightening noose. Then slowly, deliberately, Emma's heels clicked down the remaining steps. She appeared in our doorway wearing David's white button-down over her jeans, the shirt hanging loose and obviously masculine. Her hair was finger-combed but still tousled, lipstick gone, cheeks flushed with guilt and recent passion. When she saw me sitting calmly with 3 glasses of wine, her face went white. Rebecca, she whispered, my name falling from her lips like a confession. Hello, sister. I was just telling David about my incredible day. The Morrison acquisition closed early, and I decided to come home and surprise my loving family. I gestured to the empty seats. Please, both of you sit down. We have so much to discuss. Emma's eyes darted toward the front door, then back to David, then to me. She was calculating escape routes that didn't exist, finally understanding that this wasn't a discovery, it was a trial and I was the prosecutor. David found his voice first, though it came out strained. Becca, we can explain everything. It's not what it looks like. Really? I reached for my phone and opened the voice recording from an hour ago. The sound of Emma moaning David's name filled our living room, crystal clear and utterly damning. I let it play for exactly 10 seconds before pressing stop. Because it sounds exactly like what it looks like. Emma sank onto our sofa like her legs couldn't support her anymore. David remained standing, hands clenched into fists, his boardroom confidence crumbling into desperate damage control. How long have you been recording us? He demanded. Long enough. But really, David, I didn't need recordings. I pulled out my laptop and opened it to display the hotel receipts. Palmer Hotel, every Tuesday for 6 months. Marriott downtown for your Thursday client dinners. The apartment Emma rented 3 blocks away under her maiden name. Should I continue? Emma made a sound like air escaping from a balloon. Rebecca, I never meant for this to happen. We didn't plan it. You didn't plan it? I laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. Emma, you rented an apartment in February. David started booking hotel rooms in March. You've been planning this for half a year while asking me for relationship advice about your mysterious new man. David stepped forward, trying to regain control. Look, our marriage has been struggling for months. You're always working, we barely talk anymore. Emma was just someone I could connect with. Connect with? I stood slowly, wine glass in hand. Is that what you call compromising your professional ethics by conducting an affair with a client? Because Emma's lifestyle brand uses your firm's services, doesn't it, David? His face went gray. He'd forgotten about the professional implications, the conflict of interest that could destroy his partnership. And Emma, I turned to my sister, who was now openly crying. How exactly do you plan to explain this to your wellness sponsors? The family-friendly brands that pay you to represent wholesome values? I have photos of you two kissing outside your secret apartment. Very family-friendly. Emma's tears turned to sobs. Please, Rebecca. I know I messed up, but we can work through this. I'm your sister. You are my sister. Past tense. I walked to my laptop and turned the screen toward them. Divorce papers already drafted. David, you have 48 hours to collect your belongings and find somewhere else to live. The prenup we signed is ironclad. Adultery voids any claim to my assets. David's hands were shaking now, his usual charm completely useless. Becca, please. Don't do this. We can go to counseling, work things out. Emma, you're fired from our firm's marketing campaign, effective immediately. I'll be notifying your sponsors about your morality clause violations first thing tomorrow morning. I closed the laptop with finality. Both of your careers are about to become very interesting. Emma looked up at me with mascara-streaked cheeks. You're destroying our lives over a mistake. I'm not destroying anything. You two did that when you decided to have an affair in my house, in my bed, while lying to my face for 6 months. I set down my wine glass and walked toward the door. I'm simply documenting the consequences. David made one last desperate attempt. Where are you going? We need to talk about this. I picked up my purse and car keys, feeling lighter than I had in months. I'm going to celebrate the Morrison deal with colleagues who respect integrity. You two can see yourselves out. Just remember 48 hours, David. After that, the locks change. The front door closed behind me with satisfying finality, leaving them alone in the wreckage of their choices. They'd thought they were writing a love story. Instead, they'd authored their own destruction, and I was simply the editor making sure their ending was properly punctuated. The engine of my BMW purred to life as I reversed out of the driveway, leaving David and Emma to process the wreckage of their afternoon delight. But this was just the opening act. Real destruction required precision, timing, and the kind of professional connections I'd spent 15 years cultivating. My first call went to Marcus Richardson, David's business partner and the brains behind their marketing firm's success. Marcus answered on the second ring, his voice carrying the stress of someone dealing with crisis management. Rebecca, this is unexpected. Is David available? He missed our Henderson Industries presentation this afternoon. That's exactly why I'm calling, Marcus. David isn't handling the Henderson account anymore. In fact, he's not handling any accounts anymore. I pulled into the parking garage of Lou Bernardine, where my celebration dinner awaited. Check your email in the next 5 minutes. You'll understand everything. I sent the entire package while walking toward the restaurant. Private investigator photos, hotel receipts, text message screenshots, documentation of David using client meetings as cover for his affair. The evidence was damning and comprehensive. Marcus called back before I reached the hostess stand. Jesus Christ, Rebecca. How long has this been going on? His voice carried a mixture of shock and relief. I've been suspicious for months. David's been unavailable during crucial client meetings, missing deadlines, claiming Henderson demanded more time than any account justified. 6 months of documented fraud, Marcus. He's been billing client hours for hotel stays, using company resources to facilitate his affair, creating potential liability for your firm. I accepted the menu from our server while keeping my voice professional. Emma's lifestyle brand is officially your client too, which means David violated conflict of interest protocols along with basic human decency. The partnership agreement has ethics clauses for exactly this situation, Marcus said, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. Emergency partner meeting tonight. David suspended immediately, pending full investigation. Smart move. I'd also recommend reviewing all his client billings for the past 6 months. You'll find interesting discrepancies between actual work performed and hours charged. I ordered the wine pairing menu, celebrating while Marcus dealt with damage control. The Henderson Industries people will be very interested to learn they've been paying for David's romantic getaways. The conversation ended with Marcus thanking me for the evidence and promising swift action. One down. Emma's destruction required a different approach. Her income came from endorsement deals built on carefully crafted image management. Sponsors paid premium rates for her wholesome, family-friendly brand that promoted wellness, integrity, and trustworthy lifestyle advice. My second call went to Jennifer Walsh, marketing director at Serenity Wellness Company, Emma's biggest sponsor. Jennifer and I had worked together on several corporate acquisitions, and she trusted my judgment completely. Rebecca, what a pleasant surprise. Are you calling about Emma's contract renewal? We've been thrilled with her engagement rates. Actually, Jennifer, I'm calling about Emma's morality clause violations. You'll want to schedule an emergency board meeting. I sent her the evidence package while our server poured wine. Emma's been conducting an affair with a married man, her sister's husband, specifically. I have photos, documentation, and recorded evidence. The silence on Jennifer's end stretched long enough for me to take 3 sips of wine. Oh my God, Rebecca. This is devastating. Serenity's entire brand foundation is family values and authentic relationships. We can't be associated with this kind of scandal. I understand completely. I'm actually Emma's sister, so this is personally painful but professionally necessary. Her contract contains clear reputation protection clauses that this affair violates. I kept my voice sympathetic while delivering the death blow. I thought you deserved to know before it becomes public knowledge. Jennifer's response was swift and brutal. Emergency board meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. Emma's contract suspension pending investigation. Immediate removal of her content from all Serenity platforms. The domino effect I'd predicted began falling exactly as planned. The third call targeted Emma's secondary sponsors. The skincare line that featured her in their Trusted Sister campaign. The fitness brand that promoted her workout routines. The sustainable fashion company that used her family-friendly image. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Shocked silence, grateful thanks for the heads up, immediate damage control measures. By the time our appetizers arrived, Emma had lost approximately 60% of her annual income. David's professional destruction required more delicate timing. His firm needed to discover his ethics violations through proper channels to avoid wrongful termination lawsuits. But Marcus's call came right on schedule. Rebecca, the emergency partners meeting just ended. David's terminated immediately, effective tonight. We're reviewing all his client billings and may pursue legal action for fraudulent invoicing. Marcus sounded exhausted. His access to company accounts, client lists, and confidential information has been revoked. Security is collecting his personal items right now. What about the Henderson Industries situation? We're meeting with them tomorrow morning to explain David's deception and offer a complete billing audit. They're understandably concerned about paying for services that were never rendered. Paper rustled again. There's also the matter of David's equity stake in the firm. Partnership agreements include forfeiture clauses for ethics violations. David's financial foundation was crumbling in real time. No job, no partnership equity, no professional references, and potential legal action for fraud. The man who'd built his identity around marketing success would be unemployable in his own industry. But the final piece required careful media management. Chicago's marketing trade publications thrived on industry scandal, but I needed to control the narrative to protect my own reputation while destroying theirs. My call to Sarah Mitchell at Marketing Weekly was perfectly timed. Sarah owed me a favor from the Jameson merger case, and her publication reached every decision-maker in Chicago's marketing community. Sarah, I have an exclusive story about professional ethics violations at Richardson and Associates. Major partner terminated for client fraud, conflict of interest violations, and billing irregularities. I gave her enough details to write a compelling story without mentioning the personal aspects. David Richardson was conducting affairs with clients while billing fraudulent hours to their accounts. The story would run in tomorrow's digital edition, ensuring David's name became toxic throughout the industry before he could spin his own version of events. Emma's destruction hit trade publications differently. Influencer marketing blogs picked up the story about morality clause violations and sponsor contract terminations. Her professional reputation would be destroyed without me ever mentioning our family relationship. My phone buzzed with text messages as words spread through professional networks. Colleagues expressing shock about David's termination. Marketing directors thanking me for the heads-up about Emma's scandal. Industry connections distancing themselves from both my former husband and sister. The wine paired perfectly with my satisfaction. While David and Emma were probably still sitting in my living room trying to process their confrontation, their professional worlds were collapsing in real time. Phone calls, emails, emergency meetings, contract terminations, security escorts from office buildings. They'd thought their afternoon affair was a private matter between consenting adults. Instead, it had become a case study in how personal choices create professional consequences. Their reputations would never recover from this kind of industry-wide exposure. The real beauty was the systematic precision of it all. No emotional outbursts, no dramatic scenes, just methodical destruction using the same professional networks they'd built their careers upon. Their professional lives were over. Now came the interesting part, watching them try to survive the financial and social aftermath of their choices. My celebration dinner ended with a dessert course sweeter than any chef could prepare. Text messages documenting the financial implosion happening in real time. The first came from Marcus at 9:47 p.m., his words carrying the weight of corporate inevitability. Rebecca, partnership buyout calculated. Ethics violations trigger lowest valuation clause. David gets $47,000 for 7 years of equity. Profit sharing eliminated retroactively. Client portfolio being redistributed tomorrow. Sorry for the mess he created. $47,000. David had invested his entire adult life building that partnership, contributing sweat equity, bringing in major accounts, working 80-hour weeks to earn his stake in the firm. His affair had reduced 7 years of professional building to less than most people's annual salary. The financial penalty clauses were particularly brutal. Richardson and Associates had written their partnership agreements with ironclad protection against exactly this kind of ethics violation. Professional misconduct triggered forfeiture of profit-sharing bonuses, client commission residuals, and future equity growth. David wouldn't just lose his job, he'd lose every financial benefit he'd earned over the past 3 years. My phone buzzed again with a notification from Emma's Instagram account. Her follower count was dropping in real time, 127,000 down to 123,000 in the hour since news started spreading through industry networks. Each lost follower represented decreased value to sponsors who paid premium rates for her engagement metrics. But the real devastation was in the contracts being terminated simultaneously. Serenity Wellness had moved fastest, posting a statement about parting ways with brand ambassadors whose personal conduct conflicts with our family values. The domino effect spread through her sponsorship portfolio like wildfire through dry grass. FitLife Athletic terminated her fitness campaign, pulling her workout videos from their platform and demanding return of unreleased product payments. The sustainable fashion brand canceled her upcoming collection launch, which represented 6 months of work and a significant portion of her annual income. Even the local coffee shop chain ended her morning routine sponsorship, not wanting to associate their community family image with adultery scandal. I pulled up Emma's financial projections from our firm's client files. Her income stream had been diverse and substantial, $180,000 annually from primary sponsorships, $75,000 from secondary partnerships, $45,000 from appearance fees and speaking engagements. All of it built on the carefully curated image of trustworthy lifestyle expertise that her affair had demolished in one afternoon. The real estate implications hit next. Emma's luxury apartment lease was in her name alone, but the monthly rent of $4,200 was manageable only with her sponsorship income. Without those contracts, she'd be facing eviction within 2 months. The apartment she'd rented as a love nest would become a financial burden she couldn't afford. David's situation was even more precarious. Our prenuptial agreement included specific adultery clauses that voided any claim to marital property. The house, the investment accounts, the vacation home in Michigan, all remained mine exclusively. He'd be looking for bachelor apartments on a terminated employee's budget while still paying lawyers to minimize his professional damage. My phone rang as I signed the dinner check. Emma's name appeared on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. Her message played back in the restaurant bathroom, her voice shaky with panic. Rebecca, please call me back. Serenity terminated my contract tonight. They're demanding return of the advance payment for next quarter's campaign. I don't have that money. I already spent it on the apartment deposit and new equipment. Please, I need legal advice. I know you're angry, but I'm your sister. I can't afford an attorney right now. The irony was delicious. Emma needed legal help dealing with the consequences of betraying the sister who happened to be Chicago's most ruthless corporate attorney. But my legal services came with a premium that her collapsed income stream couldn't support. David's financial reality became clearer through my banking app notifications. Our joint checking account showed his desperate attempts to access funds that were no longer available to him. Declined charges at an extended stay hotel, a rejected application for a business credit line, failed transfers from accounts that required both signatures for withdrawal. The prenup had been my idea 8 years ago, over David's romantic protests about trusting love over legal protection. Now that same document was his financial death sentence, protecting every asset I'd brought into our marriage and earned during it. By midnight, my phone was buzzing with updates from various financial institutions. Emma's credit applications were being rejected due to sudden income instability. David's attempts to secure emergency loans were declined based on employment termination and professional reputation concerns. Both of them were discovering that financial institutions move quickly when scandal threatens repayment ability. The legal fees would be crushing. David needed employment law representation for his termination dispute, ethics violation defense, and potential fraud charges from billing irregularities. Emma required contract law expertise for multiple breach notifications, plus reputation management for her public relations crisis. Premium attorneys charge $500 to $800 per hour for this kind of damage control. David's case alone would generate $50,000 in legal fees before reaching any resolution. Emma's multiple contract disputes could easily cost $75,000 in representation. Combined, their legal expenses would exceed what many people earn in 2 years. Meanwhile, I was handling my own divorce proceedings personally, saving attorney fees while ensuring every detail protected my interests. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd need expensive legal help to deal with consequences I was creating using my own legal expertise. The credit rating destruction would be equally devastating. Late payments to creditors, defaulted endorsement advances, employment termination notifications, all of it would appear on their credit reports within 30 days. Their credit scores would plummet from excellent to subprime, making future apartment leases, car loans, and business opportunities exponentially more expensive. David's professional references were already contaminated. Marcus had confirmed that Richardson and Associates would provide only basic employment verification, with notes about ethics violations in his personnel file. No glowing recommendations, no positive character references, no professional networking support for job searches. Emma's situation was worse because her work depended entirely on public reputation. Influencer marketing required brands to trust that audiences would respond positively to sponsored content. Her association with adultery scandal made her untouchable for family-friendly brands, which represented 90% of the available market. The overnight financial transformation was staggering. 24 hours ago, David and Emma were successful professionals with bright financial futures. Tonight they were unemployed, facing legal bills they couldn't afford, with damaged credit and toxic professional reputations. Their afternoon affair had cost them everything they'd worked years to build. And this was just the beginning. The legal, financial, and professional consequences would continue rippling through their lives for months to come. The real ending to this story was being written in bank account balances, credit reports, and employment applications. While they'd been writing love letters, I'd been writing their financial obituaries with the same precision that had made me Chicago's youngest senior partner. Money talks loudest of all, and their bank accounts were screaming the price of betrayal. The hardest call came at 6:43 a.m. the next morning, before my parents could hear about Emma's scandal from anyone else. Mom answered on the first ring, her voice bright with early morning energy that I was about to extinguish forever. "Rebecca, honey. You're up early. How did the Morrison celebration go last night?" I sat in my kitchen with coffee growing cold, staring at family photos on the refrigerator while preparing to destroy everything they represented. Mom, I need to tell you something about Emma and David. Please sit down and put Dad on speaker. The silence stretched long enough for me to hear their bedroom door closing, footsteps moving downstairs, the kitchen chairs scraping against tile. 23 years of marriage had taught them to recognize crisis in their daughter's voice. We're both here, sweetheart, Dad said, his voice carrying the careful control of a man preparing for bad news. What's wrong? Emma has been having an affair with David for 6 months. I came home yesterday and found them together in our bedroom. The words came out clinical, professional, stripped of emotion because feeling it would break me. Their relationship is over, David is moving out and Emma is no longer part of our family. Mom's gasp turned into a sob that carried through the phone like a physical blow. Dad's silence was worse, the kind of quiet that comes from a man processing rage and disappointment in equal measure. Oh God, Rebecca. Oh God, no. Mom's voice cracked with each word. Not Emma. She wouldn't, she couldn't. I have photos, Mom. Recordings. Hotel receipts. 6 months of documented evidence. I couldn't spare them the brutal truth, couldn't let them hope for misunderstandings or reconciliation. She rented an apartment 3 blocks from my house specifically for their affair. Dad's voice, when it finally came, carried 30 years of parental authority reduced to ash. Emma is no longer welcome in this house. She's no longer welcome at family gatherings. As far as I'm concerned, we have 1 daughter now. The finality in his tone surprised me. Dad had always been Emma's champion, the parent who defended her impulsive choices and creative career path. But adultery with her sister's husband crossed every moral boundary he held sacred. What about Christmas? Mom whispered, and I could picture her looking around their decorated house, already calculating which traditions would die with Emma's banishment. Thanksgiving? Her birthday? New traditions, I said firmly. Ones that don't include people who destroy families for fun. The conversation ended with promises to call later, after they'd processed the devastation. But I knew our family dynamic had shifted permanently. 4 people had become 3 overnight, and the vacancy where Emma once belonged would be too painful to ignore. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma's 16-year-old daughter Madison. Aunt Rebecca, why are all Mom's brand deals getting cancelled? Kids at school are saying stuff about her online. What's happening? Madison and her 14-year-old brother Tyler had built their own small social media followings based on their mother's lifestyle brand. Colleges had been recruiting Madison for social media marketing programs, impressed by her authentic content creation skills. Tyler's gaming channel had attracted sponsors who valued his connection to Emma's family-friendly audience. All of that evaporated with their mother's scandal. Madison's college prospects would suffer when admissions officers Googled her family name. Tyler's gaming sponsors would distance themselves from any association with Emma's tainted reputation. The children were paying for their mother's choices in ways they couldn't fully understand yet. I didn't respond to Madison's text. How do you explain to teenagers that their mother destroyed their opportunities along with their family? David's mother called during my drive to the office, her voice shaking with shame and apology. Margaret Richardson had raised David to be better than this, instilled values that should have prevented exactly this kind of betrayal. Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I'm ashamed of my son. I don't know how he could do this to you, to his marriage, to Emma's family. Her words came through tears that sounded like they'd been building for hours. I failed as a mother somewhere. You didn't fail, Margaret. David made his choices as an adult. I kept my voice gentle because David's parents didn't deserve punishment for their son's moral bankruptcy. But I hope you understand why I can't maintain our relationship going forward. Of course you can't. Will you tell me if you need anything? I know David's father's business connections are already distancing themselves from our family. Everyone in our social circle knows by now. The Richardson family's reputation was collateral damage in David's professional destruction. His father's golf partners were already canceling their Thursday games. His mother's charity board positions were becoming awkward as other members whispered about her son's scandal. David had contaminated his entire family's social standing with his affair. The personal cost became clearer as mutual friends began choosing sides. Sarah and Michael Patterson, our couple friends for 8 years, called that afternoon with careful neutrality that fooled no one. Rebecca, we heard about you and David separating, Sarah said, her voice artificially bright. We want you to know we're here for both of you during this difficult time. Both of us. I laughed bitterly. Sarah, David was having an affair with my sister in my house for 6 months. There's no both sides to support here. The silence that followed told me everything about where their loyalties lay. Sarah and Michael valued social harmony over moral clarity, the kind of people who would suggest forgiveness and moving forward rather than acknowledging the depth of betrayal. Other friends responded differently. Jennifer Walsh from my law school class called within hours of hearing the news, her voice blazing with righteous anger. What can I do? Do you need somewhere to stay? Should I have him killed? I know people. Her fierce loyalty reminded me why true friendships survive crisis while superficial ones crumble. Emma can go straight to hell and David can drive the bus. The friend audit was brutal but clarifying. Couples who prioritized marriage preservation over justice gradually stopped inviting me to gatherings that included David. Friends who understood betrayal rallied with offers of support, spare bedrooms and character assassination services. Holiday traditions would be the hardest casualties. Thanksgiving at my parents' house had always been chaotic perfection. Emma's dramatic stories, David's terrible jokes, Mom's overcooking, Dad's football commentary. Christmas morning gift exchanges, birthday celebrations, summer barbecues. Every family tradition now carried the ghost of relationships that no longer existed. I spent that evening alone in our house, walking through rooms that David would never occupy again, looking at family photos that would need to be stored away. The guest bedroom where Emma had slept during holidays, the kitchen where she'd helped me cook countless meals, the back deck where David had grilled while we planned futures that no longer mattered. The grief was unexpected in its intensity. I'd lost more than a marriage and a sister. I'd lost an entire infrastructure of relationships, traditions, and shared history. The life I'd built over 8 years was being demolished not by my choices but by theirs. My phone lit up with Emma's 20th call of the day. I let it go to voicemail like all the others, her increasingly desperate messages forming a soundtrack to the family destruction she'd orchestrated. Rebecca, please. Mom won't take my calls. Dad hung up on me. I know I messed up but I'm still your sister. We can work through this. Please don't let one mistake destroy our family. One mistake. 6 months of calculated deception reduced to a simple error in judgment. The delusion was almost admirable in its completeness. The family bonds weren't just severed, they were incinerated. And from the ashes I would build something new. Something honest. Something that couldn't be destroyed by people who confused temporary pleasure with permanent consequences. 3 months later, I discovered that revenge tastes best when served with morning coffee and LinkedIn notifications. David's profile updates had become my guilty pleasure, each career milestone a step further down the ladder he'd once climbed with such confidence. David Richardson seeks new opportunities in digital marketing, appeared on my feed like a prayer from the desperate. His previous title of Senior Partner Richardson and Associates had been quietly edited to Marketing Professional with extensive experience. The company he'd co-founded no longer existed in his professional history, erased like their 8-year partnership had never happened. His job applications were being rejected faster than Marcus could recommend alternative candidates to fill his former role. I knew because Chicago's marketing community was surprisingly small, and word traveled through professional networks like wildfire through drought-stricken forests. Rebecca, thought you should know David interviewed at Sterling Marketing yesterday, Jennifer Walsh had called to report. He's asking for 60% of his previous salary and they still passed. His reputation is toxic. Nobody wants to hire someone who defrauds clients for personal affairs. The LinkedIn messaging became increasingly desperate as weeks turned to months. David had started reaching out to distant college connections, former clients, anyone with a marketing budget and poor background check procedures. His messages read like carefully crafted cover letters, explaining away the Richardson and Associates termination as pursuing new challenges and seeking growth opportunities. But Chicago's business community had long memories and excellent communication networks. The story of his affair-fueled fraud had become cautionary tale material, shared in boardrooms as an example of how personal misconduct destroys professional careers. Emma's attempted comeback was even more entertaining. Her new Instagram bio read, "Authentic living, single mom, real talk about real life," a complete pivot from her previous family values brand. The comments section on her rebranding posts provided better entertainment than premium cable. Authentic? You mean like authentically sleeping with your sister's husband? Appeared under every post, liked by hundreds of followers who'd stayed subscribed just to watch her public humiliation continue. Her attempted pivot to single motherhood empowerment fell flat when Madison's college friends discovered the affair details and shared them across social media platforms. Emma's teenage daughter was now known on campus as the girl whose mom destroyed her family for Instagram content. The irony was crushing. Emma's personal brand had become so toxic it was damaging her children's reputations. The follower count continued hemorrhaging despite Emma's increasingly desperate content strategies. Motivational quotes about rising from adversity and learning from mistakes generated comment threads filled with receipts of her betrayal. Screenshots of hotel records, private investigator photos, voice recordings. The internet never forgets, and Emma's audience had long memories. Her attempted collaborations with smaller brands lasted exactly one business cycle before companies discovered her reputation baggage. The fitness supplement company that initially welcomed her authentic struggle narrative canceled their contract after customer complaints flooded their social media. The self-help book publisher who'd expressed interest in her comeback story pulled their offer when focus groups responded negatively to her name recognition. But the most fascinating development was watching their relationship implode under real-world pressure. The passionate affair that had justified destroying two families was cracking under financial stress and public scrutiny. My private investigator, yes, I'd kept him on retainer, provided monthly reports that read like relationship autopsies. David and Emma had moved in together after their respective evictions, sharing a cramped apartment in a neighborhood that represented significant lifestyle downgrades for both. Subjects observed in heated argument outside apartment building, read one report. Female heard shouting about employment prospects, male responding with accusations about social media addiction. Physical posturing suggested relationship tension. The fairy tale romance was morphing into mundane cohabitation between two unemployed, publicly disgraced individuals trying to rebuild careers from rock bottom. The excitement of secret hotel meetings had been replaced by arguments over rent money and job interview failures. David's attempts at geographic escape led him to Milwaukee, where a small marketing firm offered him a junior position at entry-level salary. The man who'd once commanded six-figure partnership distributions was now cold-calling local businesses from a shared cubicle, building client lists from scratch at age 38. Emma followed a similar path to Minneapolis, where her name recognition was minimal and her scandal hadn't penetrated local influencer circles. She'd started over with 3,000 followers and sponsorship deals worth hundreds rather than thousands of dollars. Her luxury apartment had been replaced by a studio above a coffee shop. Her designer wardrobe sold to cover moving expenses. The geographic solutions weren't solving their fundamental character problems. David's new employer in Milwaukee discovered his ethics violations during their standard background check, leading to another termination and another entry on his growing list of professional failures. Emma's Minneapolis marketing attempts were undermined when Chicago-based influencers shared her story with their industry contacts. The loneliness of their new reality became apparent through social media silence. David's Facebook posts, once filled with networking events and client celebrations, had dwindled to nothing. Emma's Instagram stories showed solitary meals and empty weekends, the vibrant social life she'd once documented replaced by isolated exile. Former friends and colleagues maintained careful distance to protect their own reputations. The dinner invitations stopped coming. The holiday party guest lists no longer included their names. Professional networking events became minefields where their presence could contaminate other attendees' reputations. I received updates through mutual acquaintances who took guilty pleasure in sharing their continued downfall. Sarah Patterson, despite her initial neutral stance, couldn't resist reporting on Emma's failed attempts to rebuild her social circle. She showed up at Jennifer's birthday party uninvited, Sarah whispered during a chance encounter at Starbucks. Everyone just stopped talking when she walked in. The silence was brutal. She left after 10 minutes. David's professional isolation was even more complete. Marcus had blacklisted him from industry events, warning other business owners about his ethics violations and fraud history. The marketing community that had once competed for his expertise now actively avoided association with his tainted reputation. Their relationship, stripped of its exciting secrecy and forbidden passion, was deteriorating into mutual blame and resentment. The same people who'd risked everything for stolen moments in hotel rooms were now trapped together in the consequences of their choices, watching each other fail at rebuilding the lives they destroyed. The thrill was gone, replaced by the grinding reality of unemployment, social exile, and the permanent consequences of temporary pleasure. Their love story had become a cautionary tale, and they were living out the unhappy ending in real time. From my comfortable distance, I watched their world continue burning, fascinated by how completely they'd underestimated the long-term cost of their short-term indulgence. The real ending was still being written, one failed job application and lost friendship at a time. The Villa Rosmarina Terrace overlooked rolling hills that stretched toward infinity, painted gold by the Tuscan sunset I was meant to share with David exactly 1 year ago. Instead, I sat alone with a glass of Brunello, celebrating the most liberating anniversary of my life. The reservation I'd made in naive hope had become my declaration of independence. A solo journey that proved happiness didn't require their participation. The morning routine had become my meditation. Coffee at dawn on the villa's stone terrace, watching mist rise from vineyards while reading emails from clients who respected my integrity. The silence was different from the loneliness I'd expected. This was peaceful, intentional, chosen rather than imposed by betrayal. My phone buzzed with a notification from Blackstone and Associates. Partnership promotion confirmed, senior managing partner effective January 1st. Congratulations, Rebecca. The promotion I'd earned through crisis management rather than despite it, my colleagues recognizing that someone who could handle personal devastation with such professional precision was exactly who they wanted leading their firm. The irony was beautiful in its completeness. David and Emma's affair had inadvertently launched my career to heights I might never have reached otherwise. Clients specifically requested the attorney who'd systematically dismantled her husband's professional reputation while maintaining her own spotless record. My crisis management skills had become legendary in Chicago's legal circles. Rebecca Stone doesn't just win cases, potential clients would say. She destroys opposition so completely they never recover. The Morrison acquisition had been forgotten, overshadowed by the masterclass in strategic destruction I delivered to my own family. New business inquiries arrived daily from executives facing their own betrayals, wanting representation from someone who understood that legal warfare required both professional skill and personal steel. My billing rate had increased 40% since the divorce, and my calendar was booked 6 months in advance. The villa's infinity pool reflected stars emerging in the darkening sky as I scrolled through messages I'd been avoiding. Emma's contact information appeared repeatedly in my blocked calls list, her desperation increasing with each failed attempt at communication. The final message had arrived that morning, timed perfectly to interrupt my peaceful breakfast. Rebecca, I know you probably won't read this, but I need you to know how sorry I am. Not for getting caught, but for what I did to our family. I destroyed everything beautiful in my life for something that meant nothing. I know you can't forgive me, but please know that I love you and I'm sorry. I read it twice, feeling nothing but mild curiosity about her current circumstances. The private investigator's last report indicated Emma was working retail in Minneapolis, her influencer career permanently buried under scandal. David was selling insurance in Milwaukee, his marketing expertise worthless with his reputation. My finger hovered over the delete button for exactly 3 seconds before pressing it. Some apologies arrived too late, some bridges burned too completely for reconstruction. Emma had made her choice in our bedroom. I was making mine on this Tuscan terrace. The wine paired perfectly with my satisfaction, a vintage that cost more than Emma's monthly salary in her new reality. Financial success had accelerated along with professional achievement. The partnership promotion came with equity stakes, profit sharing, and bonuses that made David's former income look modest. My investment portfolio had tripled since the divorce, freed from David's conservative spending preferences and risky business ventures. The house we'd shared was now mine exclusively, renovated and redecorated to erase every trace of our life together. The guest bedroom where Emma used to stay had become my home office, where I planned legal strategies that built my reputation while destroying my opponents. But the real transformation was internal. The woman who'd stood frozen in her hallway listening to betrayal through bedroom walls had evolved into someone who controlled narratives rather than being controlled by them. Crisis had revealed strength I hadn't known existed, precision I hadn't needed to develop, ruthlessness I'd never had opportunity to exercise. Dating had resumed 6 months after the divorce, but with entirely different criteria. Men who demonstrated integrity under pressure rather than charm in comfortable circumstances. Professionals who understood that trust, once broken, could never be fully repaired. Relationships built on mutual respect rather than romantic fantasy. The sunset painted the sky in shades of redemption as I raised my glass to the horizon. To Emma and David, I spoke aloud to the Italian evening. Thank you for showing me exactly who you were before I wasted more years pretending you were someone else. Their betrayal had been a gift wrapped in devastation. Without their affair, I might have remained the trusting wife and sister, building my life around people who viewed loyalty as optional. Their choices had forced me to discover my own strength, to build something better from the ashes of their destruction. The villa's guest book sat open on the table beside me, previous visitors' entries sharing gratitude for peaceful retreats and romantic getaways. I wrote carefully, conscious that my words would outlast my stay. To anyone reading this who's discovered betrayal in their life, the Rayall ending belongs to you. Write it well. Our Chicago. My phone showed messages from friends celebrating their own successes, colleagues sharing professional victories, new romantic interests suggesting dinner plans for my return. A full life built on authentic relationships rather than the hollow performances David and Emma had provided. The stars emerged fully as evening deepened, countless points of light proving that beautiful things could exist independently, without requiring connection to shine. I'd learned to be complete rather than half of something broken, successful rather than supportive, strategic rather than trusting. Tomorrow I would return to Chicago, to the partnership position that awaited, to the life I'd built from the wreckage of their choices. But tonight belonged to this moment of perfect solitude, this celebration of becoming exactly who I was meant to be. They'd thought they were stealing my happiness. Instead, they'd given me the push to create something infinitely better. The real ending did belong to me, and I'd written it exactly as I wanted it to be. The wine glass caught starlight as I raised it one final time, toasting not their downfall but my own magnificent rebirth from the ashes of their betrayal. If this story of Rebecca's calculated revenge had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Rebecca played that voice recording of Emma's betrayal while they sat drinking wine in the living room, knowing she'd already destroyed both their careers. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories of justice and revenge. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.
My name is Sophia Mitchell, and I'm 27 years old. I never thought my wedding day would become a battlefield between the traditions my immigrant parents held dear and the life I was building with Jason Thompson. When they called my upcoming marriage an embarrassment to the family, something shattered inside me. Their disapproval cast a shadow over what should have been the happiest time of my life. But what happened next? Not even my wildest dreams could have prepared me for the twist that changed everything. If you're watching this video, I'd love to know where you're viewing from. Drop your location in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about navigating the complicated waters of family, love, and cultural expectations. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one. Growing up in a household where excellence wasn't just expected but demanded shaped every aspect of my identity. My parents, Anna and Michael Mitchell, left their home country with nothing but 2 suitcases and dreams of providing their future children with opportunities they never had. My father worked 16-hour days at a factory while my mother cleaned houses, both saving every penny possible. Their sacrifice was a story told at every family gathering, a reminder of the debt I could never fully repay. Our modest 2-bedroom apartment was filled with the aroma of traditional cooking and the sound of my parents speaking their native language. English was reserved for school and the outside world. At home, we maintained the customs, celebrated the holidays, and lived by the values of a country I had never visited but was taught to consider my true home. School became my sanctuary and battlefield simultaneously. I excelled academically, knowing anything less than an A would trigger my father's disappointed sigh. "We didn't come to this country for you to be average," he would say. Those words became my internal compass, guiding me through sleepless nights of studying and weekends spent on extra credit projects while my American friends enjoyed sleepovers and mall trips. College brought the first taste of freedom. Moving into a dorm room 2 hours away from home felt like crossing an ocean. I could choose my schedule, my friends, and even what to eat without consideration of tradition. Yet guilt followed me like a shadow. Each new American habit I adopted felt like a small betrayal of my heritage. I started living in two worlds, calling home every Sunday to speak in my parents' language and discuss traditional topics, while building a separate life filled with new experiences they wouldn't understand or approve of. After graduation, I secured a job at a marketing firm in the city. My parents bragged about my degree and career to relatives, but questioned my decision to live alone in an apartment instead of returning home until marriage. "Good daughters stay with family," my mother would remind me during our weekly calls. I would nod through the video chat while sitting in an apartment decorated in a style that would make her frown. Then came the charity event that changed everything. My firm had volunteered to handle marketing for a fundraiser benefiting education in developing countries. The cause resonated with me, reminding me of the opportunities my parents had sought. I was reviewing the event setup when Jason Thompson, the fundraiser coordinator, approached me about a last-minute change to the presentation materials. Jason stood out immediately, not just because of his tall frame and warm smile, but because of the passionate way he spoke about the cause. "Education changed my family's trajectory," he explained. "My grandparents never made it past 8th grade, but they made sure my mom went to college. Now I'm trying to pay that forward." In his words, I heard echoes of my own family's journey, though his laid-back demeanor and easy laugh contrasted sharply with my parents' serious approach to life. We exchanged numbers for professional reasons, but soon our texts shifted from work topics to personal conversations. Our first date wasn't planned as such. We both stayed after the successful fundraiser to help clean up, then found ourselves hungry and alone at midnight, sharing fries at the only diner still open. I learned that Jason came from a typically American family in Ohio, with parents who encouraged him to find his passion rather than follow a prescribed path. The freedom in his upbringing both fascinated and slightly unsettled me. Dating Jason brought challenges I hadn't anticipated. He couldn't understand why I needed to lie to my parents about where I was spending my weekends or why meeting them was out of the question for the first 6 months. "They're not ready," was all I could explain, while thinking about the inevitable disappointment they would express at my choice of an American boyfriend with no connection to our culture. But Jason proved remarkably patient and genuinely interested in understanding my background. He asked me to teach him basic phrases in my parents' language, researched our traditional holidays, and even learned to cook a simplified version of my favorite childhood dish. "I might not get it all right," he said while presenting his slightly imperfect creation, "but I want to know the things that made you who you are." After 2 years together, I finally gathered the courage to introduce Jason to my parents. The dinner was tense, with my father asking pointed questions about Jason's family, education, and career plans. My mother remained mostly silent, serving food and watching with cautious eyes. Jason maintained his composure, answering respectfully and even attempting a few phrases in their language. They didn't exactly warm to him, but they didn't reject him outright, which I counted as a small victory. The proposal came a year later, on a crisp fall evening at the Botanical Gardens. Jason had arranged a private tour that culminated in the cultural display featuring plants from my parents' homeland. There, surrounded by familiar flowers my mother had always tried to grow in our apartment windowsill, he knelt and presented a ring. "I want to build a life that honors where both of us come from while creating something new together," he said. Through tears, I accepted. That night, staring at the ring on my finger, I felt both elation and dread. The man I loved had proposed in a way that thoughtfully acknowledged my heritage. Now I just had to tell my parents I intended to marry someone they had merely tolerated during 3 uncomfortable family dinners. I rehearsed the conversation for days, plotting the perfect time and crafting the perfect words that would help them see Jason as I did. I chose a Sunday dinner at their home, hoping the familiar setting would soften the news. I brought Jason's mother's homemade apple pie as a peace offering, trying to demonstrate how our families could share traditions. As we ate my mother's carefully prepared traditional meal, I spoke of my future plans, strategically emphasizing Jason's stable job, his respect for family values, and his interest in our culture. For a moment, as my parents nodded along, I allowed myself to hope this might be easier than expected. That hope evaporated in an instant when I finally said the words, "Jason has asked me to marry him, and I've said yes." The silence that followed felt eternal, broken only by the sound of my father's fork clattering against his plate. Absolutely not. My father's voice was low but firm, a tone I recognized from childhood as non-negotiable. He looked not at me but at the wall behind me, as if he couldn't bear to meet my eyes. "This is not the plan we had for you." "Dad, please," I started, but he cut me off with a raised hand. "We have been patient with this relationship." He struggled to find the right word, settling on one that minimized the 2-year connection Jason and I had built. "We thought you would come to your senses. Find someone from our community, someone who understands our ways." My mother, usually the mediator, remained uncharacteristically silent, staring down at her half-eaten dinner. When she finally spoke, her words stunned me more than my father's outright rejection. "What will people say, Sophia? Have you thought about that? Our family back home, our friends here, our community at the cultural center." She shook her head, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "They will talk. They will say we failed as parents, that we allowed our daughter to become too American." "This isn't about other people," I insisted, feeling my carefully rehearsed speech crumbling. "This is about Jason and me, our happiness, our future." My father scoffed. "Marriage has never been just about two people. It is about families joining, traditions continuing, children being raised properly." He pushed his plate away. "This wedding you're planning, it would be an embarrassment to this family." The words sliced through me like a physical pain. Embarrassment. All my life, I had worked to make my parents proud, to be the daughter they sacrificed everything for. Now my happiness was an embarrassment to them. "Jason is a good man," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "He respects you both. He's trying to learn about our culture. He supports my career and my connections to our heritage." "He will never understand," my father insisted. "And your children? They will be strangers to our ways, not knowing who they truly are." "They'll know both sides of their heritage," I countered, speaking with more confidence than I felt. "Jason and I have already talked about raising them with awareness of both cultures." My mother reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. For a moment, I thought she was offering support, but her words proved otherwise. "Sophia, darling, mixed marriages are so difficult. The novelty wears off, and then you're left with someone who can never truly understand your heart. Is that what you want for yourself? For your children?" I pulled my hand away, feeling a new emotion rising through the hurt, anger. "What I want is for my parents to trust that they raised me well enough to make my own decisions. To be happy that I've found someone who treats me with respect and love." My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "If you choose this path, you choose it without our blessing." For the first time in my life, I didn't back down from my father's ultimatum. "Then that's what I'll have to do." I stood as well, gathering my purse and the untouched apple pie. "I love you both, but I love Jason too. I won't choose between you." The drive home passed in a blur of tears. I called Jason from the parking lot of my apartment building, unable to go inside alone with the weight of what had just happened. He arrived 20 minutes later, holding me as I recounted the devastating dinner. "We knew this might happen," he said gently, stroking my hair. "But they might come around, given time." "You don't know them like I do," I replied. "Once my father makes up his mind, it's set in stone." The following weeks proved me right. My calls went unanswered. Texts received brief, formal responses, if any. When I dropped by their apartment unannounced, my mother opened the door but wouldn't let me in, saying my father wasn't ready to talk. She hugged me quickly before sending me away, her eyes darting nervously toward the interior of the apartment as if afraid he would catch her showing affection. The contrast with Jason's family couldn't have been more stark. When we told his parents about the engagement, his mother Caroline had burst into tears of joy before pulling me into a crushing hug. "Welcome to the family, sweetheart," she'd said. His father Robert had clapped Jason on the back before embracing me as well. "About time," he joked. "We were starting to think he'd never work up the courage to ask you." Jason's sister Natalie immediately started a group text with wedding planning ideas, adding me to her Pinterest boards filled with ceremony inspiration. Their unconditional acceptance made my parents' rejection even more painful. In a desperate attempt to bridge the gap, I arranged a dinner between both families. "Just give them a chance to get to know each other," I pleaded with my parents over voicemail. "See how Jason's family respects our traditions." To my surprise, they agreed. The dinner was set for a Saturday evening at a neutral location, a private room at a restaurant that served cuisine from my parents' homeland. I spent hours briefing Jason's family on cultural etiquette and topics to avoid, while simultaneously begging my parents to approach the evening with an open mind. From the moment they arrived, 10 minutes apart, the tension was palpable. My father shook hands stiffly with Robert, barely acknowledging Caroline's warm greeting. My mother made a visible effort, complimenting Caroline's dress and asking about her work as a high school teacher. The first course arrived with conversation still stilted. Jason's father, trying to break the ice, mentioned how much he enjoyed trying the traditional dishes I had introduced to their family gatherings. "Sophia was always an excellent cook," my mother offered, the first positive note of the evening. "I taught her from when she was very small." Caroline smiled warmly. "She's been teaching Jason too. Last week they made some kind of pastry that I couldn't pronounce, but couldn't stop eating." Instead of appreciating this point of connection, my father frowned. "Our food is not a novelty to be sampled," he said coldly. "These recipes have been in our family for generations." Robert, sensing the sudden chill, tried to redirect. "That's what makes them special. We'd love to learn more about your family traditions. After all, we're going to be family soon too." "That remains to be seen," my father replied. The comment hung in the air like a thundercloud. Jason reached for my hand under the table as I fought back tears. The remainder of the dinner proceeded with painful small talk interrupted by long silences. When dessert was finally served, my father checked his watch and announced they needed to leave. In the parking lot, Caroline attempted one final connection, approaching my mother with genuine warmth. "I know this is difficult, but I want you to know we'll make sure your traditions are honored in the wedding and in Sophia and Jason's life together." My mother nodded politely, but said nothing. My father, overhearing, turned to me with cold fury in his eyes. "There will be no honoring of traditions in a ceremony we cannot support." He took my mother's arm. "Let's go." As their car pulled away, I collapsed against Jason, the full weight of their rejection crushing me anew. His parents surrounded us in a group hug, their support both comforting and a painful reminder of what my own parents were withholding. "They'll come around," Robert said, but the uncertainty in his voice betrayed his doubt. Back home that night, Jason held me as I cycled through grief, anger, and determination. "We're still getting married," I finally said, wiping away tears. "With or without them." "Are you sure?" Jason asked, his concern evident. "I don't want to be what comes between you and your family." "You're not doing this," I said firmly. "This is their choice. And I've made mine." As wedding planning began in earnest, the silence from my parents grew into a physical ache I carried daily. Each decision, venue, flowers, food, felt incomplete without my mother's input. Each night I fell asleep wondering if tomorrow would be the day they would call, saying they had reconsidered. That call never came. The bridal boutique sparkled with promise as my future mother-in-law Caroline, Jason's sister Natalie, and my two closest friends gathered around me. The consultant brought gown after gown, each one more beautiful than the last. Under different circumstances, this would have been a day of pure joy. "What do you think of this one?" I asked, twirling in a delicate A-line dress with lace detailing. "It's stunning," Caroline said, her eyes misty. Your mom would love it, my friend Amy added, then immediately clamped her hand over her mouth. I'm so sorry, I wasn't thinking. I forced a smile. It's okay. But it wasn't. My mother should have been here, fussing over the fabric, insisting on seeing every option before making a decision. Instead, I had left my 12th voicemail this month, describing wedding plans that received no response. The weekly calls had become a ritual of disappointment. Hi Mom, it's me again. We've settled on a date in June. I'd really love your input on the ceremony. Each message ended with the same plea, please call me back. They never did. The wedding invitations presented another painful decision. Do we send one to your parents? Jason asked gently as we reviewed the guest list in our apartment. Of course, I said without hesitation. They're my parents. The elegant cream envelope containing my parents' invitation felt heavier than the others as I dropped the stack at the post office. 3 days later, it appeared back in our mailbox unopened, with return to sender written in my father's unmistakable handwriting. I stared at the rejected invitation until Jason gently took it from my trembling hands. I'm so sorry, sophomore. That night, I sobbed in the shower where Jason couldn't hear me, mourning the wedding day I had always imagined, my father walking me down the aisle, my mother helping adjust my veil in the final moments before the ceremony. A surprising lifeline appeared the following week. My phone rang with an unfamiliar number that turned out to be my Aunt Lydia, my mother's younger sister. Sophia, darling, she whispered into the phone. I can't talk long. Your mother doesn't know I'm calling. My heart raced. Is everything okay? Are they okay? They're fine, just stubborn and proud. She sighed. I wanted you to know that not everyone in the family agrees with them. I've seen the photos of Jason you posted online. He looks like a good man. Tears welled up. He is, Aunt Lydia. He really is. I know, sweetheart. And I want to help with your wedding if you'll let me. I can't come. Your parents would never forgive me, but I can send you something. A week later, a package arrived containing my grandmother's hand-embroidered table runner. For your head table, Aunt Lydia's note read, something from your heritage to bless your new beginning. Your grandmother would have wanted you to have it. The unexpected support gave me courage to continue incorporating cultural elements into our wedding plans. I found a baker who could recreate the traditional wedding bread my culture served for good fortune. I selected music that would honor both Jason's American upbringing and my dual heritage. Each choice felt like building a bridge my parents refused to cross. Jason, true to his word, threw himself into learning more about my culture. He practiced phrases with an online tutor, researched traditional wedding customs, and even suggested ways to incorporate meaningful symbols into our ceremony. I want your whole self represented, he insisted, even the parts your parents think I'm taking away. His family proved equally supportive. Caroline helped me adapt traditional recipes for the reception menu. Robert learned about cultural wedding traditions to honor during his father of the groom speech. Natalie found a seamstress who could add traditional embroidery patterns to my otherwise modern wedding dress. Their efforts touched me deeply while simultaneously highlighting the absence of my own family. One Sunday afternoon, while gathering photos for a reception display, I came across an image of my parents on their own wedding day. My mother, radiant in her traditional attire. My father, proud and tall beside her. They looked so happy, so full of hope for their future together. What had happened to those two young people who once faced their own unknown future with courage? The universe offered an unexpected chance to find out. While picking up coffee at the shop near my office, I literally bumped into my father, spilling his drink all over both of us. I'm so sorry, Dad. The shock of seeing him rendered me momentarily speechless. He looked equally startled, frozen in place as the barista rushed over with napkins. For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of his old affection before his expression hardened again. Sophia. He nodded formally while dabbing at his stained shirt. Please, let me buy you another coffee, I said quickly, desperate to prolong the encounter. We could sit for a minute? He hesitated, and hope fluttered in my chest. Then he shook his head. I have an appointment. Dad, please. 5 minutes? I'm getting married in 3 weeks. I just want. I know when you're getting married, he interrupted, his voice low. Your mother cries about it every night. The revelation stunned me. If it upsets her so much, why won't she talk to me? Why won't either of you just talk to me? What is there to say? You've made your choice. He straightened his jacket. We did not raise you to abandon your heritage. I'm not abandoning anything. Jason and I are incorporating traditions from both our backgrounds. You'd know that if you returned any of my calls. His expression didn't soften. Half measures and tourist attractions. That's what our culture becomes in this arrangement. That's not fair. You haven't even tried to. I have to go. He stepped around me, then paused. Almost without turning, he added, Your mother wanted me to ask if you're wearing her necklace. The one from your grandmother. The question caught me off guard. I was hoping to, but I thought she would want you to have it. He walked away without another word, leaving me standing amid coffee shop patrons pretending not to watch our exchange. That night, I recounted the strange encounter to Jason. I don't understand, I said, pacing our living room. He can barely look at me, but he asks about grandmother's necklace? Jason considered this. Maybe it's their way of giving some kind of blessing without actually saying it? I shook my head. You don't know my father. If he wanted to give a blessing, he'd find a way that makes his authority clear. I sank onto the couch. 3 weeks until the wedding, and I'm still hoping for a miracle that isn't coming. Jason sat beside me, taking my hands in his. Whatever happens, we're building something beautiful together. Your parents may not see it now, but someday they might. And if they don't? Then it's their loss, he said simply. But our door will always be open when they're ready. I leaned against his shoulder, drawing strength from his steady presence. The wedding would proceed in 3 weeks with or without my parents. I had to accept that reality while somehow keeping my heart open to the family who had shaped me, even as they broke my heart. The final weeks of preparation passed in a blur of vendor confirmations, last-minute adjustments, and the arrival of out-of-town guests. Jason's extended family embraced me warmly, his grandmother insisting on teaching me her secret recipe for apple pie, now that you'll be a Thompson too. Their acceptance soothed the raw edges of my parents' rejection, even as it highlighted the contrast between our families. The night before the wedding, a small package arrived by courier. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay my grandmother's necklace, a delicate gold chain with a small pendant inscribed with an ancient symbol for prosperity. There was no note, no explanation. Just the precious heirloom my mother had promised would one day be mine. I held it to my chest, tears flowing freely. It wasn't forgiveness or acceptance, but it was something. A thread still connecting me to my family, even as I prepared to start a new one. As I drifted off to sleep in the hotel room I was sharing with my bridesmaids, I allowed myself one last hope that tomorrow might bring the miracle I'd been praying for. The call came at 5:47 a.m., jarring me from restless sleep the morning of my wedding day. My Aunt Lydia's panicked voice cut through my groggy confusion. Sophia, it's your grandmother. She's in the hospital. They're saying it might be a stroke. I sat bolt upright, instantly alert. Which hospital? Is she okay? Memorial General. Your parents are already here. Her voice dropped. Sophia, it's serious. The doctors aren't making any promises. My grandmother, the family matriarch who had emigrated first, paving the way for her children to follow. The woman who had taught me to make dumplings while telling stories of the old country. The keeper of our family history. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, already searching for clothes. My bridesmaids stirred at the commotion. What's happening? Amy asked, concern etched on her face. Family emergency. I have to go to the hospital. I pulled on jeans and a sweater, my mind racing. The hair and makeup people are coming at 10. If I'm not back. I couldn't finish the thought. Don't worry about any of that, Amy insisted. Just go. We'll handle everything here. The hospital corridor stretched endlessly before me as I followed signs to the intensive care unit. My stomach knotted at the thought of seeing my parents for the first time in months under these circumstances. Would they even acknowledge me? Ask me to leave? I rounded the corner and saw them immediately, my mother slumped in a chair, my father standing stiffly beside her, his hand on her shoulder. They looked older somehow, worn down by worry. My mother noticed me first, her red-rimmed eyes widening. "Sophia," she whispered, as if saying my name might break something fragile in the air between us. My father turned, his expression unreadable. For a moment, no one moved. Then my mother rose and crossed to me, her arms opening hesitantly. I stepped into her embrace, inhaling her familiar scent of rosewater and home. "How is she?" I asked when we finally separated. "Stable for now," my father answered, his voice rough with fatigue. "The doctor says the next 24 hours are critical." 24 hours. My wedding was in 8. "Can I see her?" My mother nodded. "She's been asking for you." They led me to a private room where my grandmother lay connected to monitors that beeped steadily. Her small frame seemed lost among the hospital sheets. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. "Grandma?" I approached cautiously, taking her papery hand in mine. "It's Sophia." Her eyelids fluttered, then opened. Recognition dawned slowly, followed by a weak smile. "My Sophia," she whispered in our native language. "The bride." Tears threatened as I nodded. "Yes, Grandma. Today's the wedding." She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "You will still marry. Promise me." "Grandma, I don't know if." "Promise." Her gaze was suddenly fierce. Joy does not wait for sorrow to finish. My mother made a small sound behind me, something between a sob and a protest. My grandmother's eyes shifted to her daughter. "Anna," she called. "Come here. Both of you." My parents approached the bed hesitantly. My grandmother looked between them, then fixed her gaze on my father. "Michael," she said, using his American name, which she rarely did. "Tell me why you refused to attend your daughter's wedding." My father stiffened. "Mother, this isn't the time." "When better," she interrupted. "When I am dead. Then you will have no one to answer to but yourself." She turned to me. "Leave us, Sophia. I must speak with your parents alone." Reluctantly, I stepped into the hallway, where Aunt Lydia waited. "What's happening?" she asked. "Grandma's giving them a talking to, I think." Despite everything, I almost smiled. Even bedridden, my grandmother remained a force of nature. Time stretched as I waited, torn between the crisis unfolding at the hospital and the wedding preparations proceeding across town. I called Jason, explaining the situation in a hushed voice. "Do what you need to do," he said without hesitation. "If we need to postpone, we will." "No," I said firmly, my grandmother's words echoing in my mind. "Joy does not wait for sorrow to finish. We're getting married today, even if it's just you and me in the hospital chapel." "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." After nearly an hour, the door to my grandmother's room opened. My mother emerged first, her eyes downcast, but no longer tearful. My father followed, his face a complex mask of emotions I couldn't quite read. "She wants to see you again," my mother said softly. "Alone this time." I re-entered the room to find my grandmother looking exhausted, but somehow satisfied. She patted the edge of the bed, indicating I should sit. "My Sophia," she began, reverting to our native language. "So beautiful, so stubborn. Like your father." She smiled weakly. "He thinks you are abandoning our ways." I told him he is a fool. "Grandma." She raised a hand to silence me. "Listen now. I have little strength." She took a labored breath. "Did they ever tell you how your parents met?" I shook my head, surprised by the question. "Your father was studying engineering. Your mother worked in the university library. He saw her and decided immediately she would be his wife." A smile ghosted across her lips. "But your grandfather and I forbade it." "What?" "Why? Her family was from the southern province. Different dialect, different customs. Not suitable, we said." She coughed, and I quickly offered her water. After sipping slowly, she continued. "They married anyway. Without our blessing." The revelation stunned me. My parents had always presented their marriage as traditionally arranged and approved. "Your grandfather refused to attend the wedding." I went in secret. Her eyes twinkled with the memory. "I wore a headscarf so no one would recognize me. But when I saw your mother walking toward my son, looking at him with such love, I knew we had been wrong." "What happened then?" 2 years of silence. "Until you were born." She squeezed my hand. "They brought you to meet us when you were 1 week old. Your grandfather took one look at your perfect face and forgot he had ever objected. Tears slid down my cheeks as pieces of my family history rearranged themselves. Why didn't they ever tell me? Shame, perhaps. Or not wanting you to know they had defied tradition. She gazed at me intently. You're Jason. He is a good man. The best I've ever known. He respects where you come from, who you are. More than I sometimes do myself, I admitted. She nodded, satisfied. Then bring him to me. Before the wedding. I want to meet the man brave enough to enter our complicated family. Grandma, the doctor said. I have lived 82 years. I will decide what matters now. Her tone brooked no argument. Bring him today. Then go and be married. And my parents? She closed her eyes briefly. They must find their own way, as you have found yours. As they once found theirs. She touched my cheek. The necklace. You received it. I nodded. It came last night. No note. Your mother polished it herself. She smiled faintly. The first step is always the hardest. I left the hospital with a promise to return with Jason in a few hours. My mind reeled with revelations about my parents' own rebellion against tradition, the very thing they now condemned me for. Had they forgotten their own journey? Or were they trying to spare me from the pain they had endured? Back at the hotel, wedding preparations were in full swing. My bridesmaids had handled the arriving hair and makeup artists, steamed my dress, and fielded calls from vendors. I shared a condensed version of the morning's events as stylists transformed my appearance into that of a bride. So your grandmother wants to meet Jason before the ceremony? Amy clarified as the makeup artist applied my foundation. Yes. And somehow I need to get into my dress, go to the hospital, then make it to the venue on time. The impossibility of the schedule threatened to overwhelm me. We'll make it work, Amy declared, already texting the wedding planner to rearrange the timeline. Jason arrived at the hotel looking handsome in his tuxedo, concern etched on his face. How are you holding up? Honestly? I don't know. I explained my grandmother's revelations about my parents' marriage. All this time, they've been condemning us for something they did themselves. People often fight hardest against seeing their own reflection, Jason said thoughtfully. Maybe facing their past through you is too painful. In the hospital parking lot, I paused before exiting the car, suddenly aware of how bizarre this detour must seem. I'm sorry our wedding day includes a hospital visit. Jason took my hands. Sophia, today is about beginning our life together. That includes all the complicated, messy parts of family. He smiled. Besides, I want to thank your grandmother for creating half of the amazing woman I'm about to marry. The hospital corridors felt different with Jason beside me, his calm presence steadying my nerves. Outside my grandmother's room, we encountered my parents, who froze at the sight of us in our wedding attire. My mother recovered first, her eyes widening as she took in my appearance. Sophia, she whispered. You look beautiful, my father finished unexpectedly, his voice rough. An awkward silence fell. Jason stepped forward, extending his hand to my father. Mr. Mitchell. Thank you for raising such an incredible daughter. My father stared at the offered hand for a long moment before accepting it with a stiff nod. Not exactly warm, but not a rejection either. Is Grandma awake? I asked, desperate to move past the tension. Yes, my mother answered. She's been watching the clock, waiting for you. They stepped aside to let us enter. My grandmother's face lit up at the sight of us, her smile the brightest thing in the sterile room. Ah, here they are. The beautiful couple. She beckoned Jason closer. Let me see the man who has stolen my granddaughter's heart. Jason approached respectfully, taking her fragile hand in his. It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Mitchell. Sophia has told me so much about you. Has she told you I am stubborn? That I speak my mind? Her eyes twinkled. She mentioned you're the family truth teller, Jason replied with a smile. Good. Then you will believe me when I say this. She held his gaze intently. Marriage is never easy. Two people from the same village, same family, same traditions. Still they must work every day to understand each other. You and Sophia, you have a bigger mountain to climb. I know, Jason said seriously. But I believe what's on the other side is worth it. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded approvingly. You will need patience. And a sense of humor. My granddaughter is more like her father than she knows. Grandma. I protested, blushing. She ignored me, focusing on Jason. Do you promise to remember that even when she pushes you away, she is really asking you to try harder to understand? I promise, he said solemnly. And do you promise to teach your children about both sides of their heritage? The stories, the language, the traditions. With your help, Jason answered, I hope to learn those stories myself, so I can share them too. My grandmother's eyes filled with tears. Good answer. She reached for my hand, bringing it together with Jason's. Now, I give you my blessing. Go and be married. Be happy. Fight well and make up better. I leaned down to kiss her cheek. I wish you could be there. I will be, she assured me. In here. She tapped my heart. Now go. Your future is waiting, and I need to speak with your parents again. As we turned to leave, my grandmother called out, Jason. Take care of our Sophia. Every day of my life, he promised. In the hallway, my parents stood awkwardly, clearly unsure of the protocol for this unusual situation. I hesitated, then stepped toward them. We're heading to the ceremony now, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The invitation still stands. If you want to come. My father cut me off. We have to stay with your grandmother. I nodded, swallowing disappointment. I understand. I just wanted you to know you're still welcome. As Jason and I walked away, I heard my grandmother's voice ring out from her hospital room. Michael. Anna. Get in here now. Despite everything, I smiled. Whatever she had to say, I knew they would listen. Whether it would change anything remained to be seen. The bridal suite buzzed with activity as my bridesmaids helped adjust my veil. Through the window, I could see guests arriving at the garden venue, a beautiful blend of traditions already visible in the decorations. White garden roses mingled with vibrant flowers from my parents' homeland. The traditional American white runner was bordered with patterns inspired by my cultural heritage. How are you feeling? Amy asked, smoothing a wrinkle from my dress. Like I'm living in a parallel universe, I admitted. This morning I was in a hospital room with my grandmother, who might not survive the week. Now I'm about to walk down the aisle. Your grandmother was right, Amy said gently. Joy doesn't wait for sorrow to finish. Sometimes they hold hands. Caroline knocked softly before entering, looking elegant in her blue mother-of-the-groom dress. Oh, Sophia, she breathed. You're absolutely radiant. I smiled, grateful for her presence while still feeling the absence of my own mother acutely. Caroline seemed to read my thoughts. I brought something, she said, opening her clutch. It's a bracelet my mother wore at her wedding, and I wore at mine. Something borrowed, if you'd like. The delicate silver bracelet glittered as she fastened it around my wrist. Thank you, I whispered, touched by the gesture. For everything. You've been so welcoming from the beginning. That's what family does, she said simply, squeezing my hands. And your family now. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. The wedding planner poked her head in. 15 minutes, ladies. Groom is in position, guests are seated. As my bridesmaids made final adjustments to their dresses, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Aunt Lydia. My heart stopped. Was it news about my grandmother? Hello. I answered, stepping away from the others. Sophia. Aunt Lydia's voice was tight with emotion. Your grandmother's condition has worsened. The doctors don't think. She paused. They're saying it might be a matter of hours. The room seemed to tilt around me. I'll come right away. No, Aunt Lydia interrupted firmly. She specifically said you are not to cancel the wedding. Those were her exact words. But if these are her last hours, she insists this is what she wants. For you to be married as planned. Her voice softened. She also told me to make sure you wear her necklace. I touched the pendant at my throat, tears threatening to ruin my carefully applied makeup. I'm wearing it. Good. She'll be happy to know that. Aunt Lydia hesitated. There's something else. She asked me to send something with your parents, but they're not coming, I finished, the familiar ache returning. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. After we hung up, I stood frozen, torn between worlds. The wedding I had planned for months was minutes away. My beloved grandmother was possibly taking her last breaths across town. And my parents remained absent, their seats in the front row destined to remain empty. A soft knock broke my reverie. The wedding planner again. Sophia? It's time to line up. I nodded, taking a deep breath and smoothing my dress. This was still my wedding day. Jason was waiting. Our future was beginning, even as a piece of my past was possibly ending. The bridesmaids filed out, leaving me alone for a final moment. I looked in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me in her white gown and carefully arranged hair. I touched my grandmother's necklace, drawing strength from the connection to my heritage it represented. Okay, I whispered to my reflection. Let's do this. The wedding coordinator guided me to the garden entrance where the procession would begin. Through an archway, I could see the rows of guests, the flower-adorned altar, and Jason standing tall and handsome, waiting for me. My heart swelled with love even as it ached with absence. The music changed, my cue to begin walking. With no father to escort me, I had decided to make the journey alone. A statement of independence, I had told myself when making the decision. Now it felt like a symbol of loss. I took my first step onto the petal-strewn aisle, forcing a smile as guests rose to their feet. Everyone's eyes were on me, expressions of joy and admiration on their faces. I focused on Jason, his loving gaze pulling me forward when my steps wanted to falter. Halfway down the aisle, a commotion at the back of the garden caught my attention. Guests turned, murmuring. Thinking perhaps someone had arrived late, I continued walking, determined not to be distracted. Then I heard it, my name, spoken in my father's distinctive voice. Sophia. I turned, unable to believe my ears. There, at the garden entrance, stood my father dressed in his best suit, the traditional formal attire from our homeland. Beside him, my mother wiped tears from her eyes, resplendent in a dress that perfectly complemented the wedding colors. The music continued playing as I stood frozen in the middle of the aisle, unable to process what I was seeing. My father approached slowly, his expression a complex mixture of emotions. "May I?" he asked softly, offering his arm in the traditional way. Words failed me. I nodded, hardly daring to believe this was real. As he took his place beside me, he leaned close. "Your grandmother can be very persuasive," he whispered. "And very wise." Tears threatened again as we resumed the walk toward Jason, who was beaming with understanding. My mother slipped quickly into the front row seat that had been reserved for my parents, dabbing at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. When we reached the altar, the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" My father's voice was steady as he answered, "Her mother, and I do." He placed my hand in Jason's, then added something unexpected in our native language, the traditional blessing I had never dared hope to hear. The ceremony proceeded like a dream. Jason and I exchanged vows we had written ourselves, promising to honor each other's heritage and build a life that celebrated both. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the garden erupted in applause that seemed to bridge cultures, generations, and misunderstandings. At the reception, my father approached while Jason was busy greeting guests. "I owe you an explanation," he said quietly. "What happened?" I asked, still overwhelmed by their sudden appearance. "Your grandmother happened." He smiled faintly. "After you left, she reminded us of our own wedding day. How her disapproval nearly cost her a relationship with you." His eyes grew distant. "She said she would not allow us to make the same mistake." "Just like that, you changed your mind?" "Not just like that, no." He looked down. "We've been struggling with this for months. Your mother more than me, perhaps." He met my gaze directly. "When your grandmother's condition worsened this morning, she made us promise. She said life is too short for such stubbornness. That sometimes traditions must bend so families don't break." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "And you agreed?" We remembered how it felt to be young and in love, facing disapproval from those whose opinions mattered most. He hesitated. "I still have concerns, Sophia. Cultural differences in marriage are not easy to navigate. But..." He glanced across the room at Jason, who was laughing with an elderly relative. "He seems to be a good man who truly loves you. That is the foundation everything else can be built upon." Before I could respond, the wedding planner announced it was time for the first dance. Jason appeared at my side, politely acknowledging my father before leading me to the dance floor. "Your parents," he whispered as we began to sway to the music. "I can't believe they're here." "Grandma's doing," I explained, still processing everything myself. "Apparently she gave them an ultimatum from her hospital bed." Jason smiled. "Remind me never to cross your grandmother." "If we have a daughter someday, I hope she has Grandma's spirit," I said, then realized what I'd implied. "I mean, I hope so too," Jason said simply, pulling me closer. As the reception continued, my mother approached cautiously during the dinner service. "The ceremony was beautiful," she offered. "So many thoughtful touches from our culture." "Jason researched everything himself," I told her. "He wanted to honor where I come from." She nodded, seeming to struggle with what to say next. "Your grandmother asked me to give you something." She reached into her small purse and withdrew an envelope. "She wrote this for you last night. She said it should be read during the reception." I accepted the envelope with trembling hands. "How is she?" "Holding on." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "She's determined to hear all about the wedding tomorrow." The envelope contained a single sheet of paper covered in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. Jason leaned close as I unfolded it, his arm supportive around my waist. "Should I read it?" I asked the wedding planner, who had appeared at my elbow. She nodded. "I'll have the DJ lower the music." As the room quieted, I stepped to the microphone, Jason by my side. "My grandmother couldn't be here today," I explained, my voice wavering slightly. "But she sent this letter to be read." I took a deep breath and began to read. "My dearest Sophia and Jason, today you begin a journey that will require courage, patience, and above all, love. Marriage is never simple, even when two people share the same history. When you come from different worlds, you must work harder to understand each other's hearts. Sophia, remember that the traditions we hold dear are not meant to be prison walls, but foundations from which to grow. Your heritage is not something you leave behind, but something you bring with you, sharing its beauty with those you love. Jason, in welcoming Sophia, you welcome all that made her who she is, her history, her culture, her family with all our complications. Learn our stories. They are becoming part of your story now too. Together, you have the rare opportunity to build something new, a bridge between worlds, a family that honors multiple traditions while creating your own. This is not a betrayal of the past, but a gift to the future. To those who feared this union would diminish our cultural heritage, I say this: love never diminishes, it only multiplies. Each generation must find its own way to carry forward what matters most. May your home be filled with laughter in many languages. May your table welcome all who come in peace. May your children know the richness of their dual heritage. And may you always remember that the most important tradition of all is love. With all my heart, your grandmother. By the time I finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. My parents stood together near the back, my father's arm around my mother's shoulders. Something had shifted, not a complete transformation, but a beginning. The DJ gently resumed the music as Jason pulled me close. "Your grandmother should write greeting cards," he said, making me laugh through my tears. "She always knows exactly what to say," I agreed. "Always has." Later, during the traditional father-daughter dance that I had assumed would be skipped, my father approached hesitantly. "May I?" he asked for the second time that day. As we moved somewhat awkwardly to the music, he said, "Your grandmother's letter. She has always been wiser than the rest of us." "She's had more practice," I offered with a small smile. "Sophia." He stopped dancing, looking directly at me. "I want you to know something. Even when I disapproved of your choices, I never stopped loving you. Not for one moment." The simple statement unlocked something that had been tightly bound inside me. "I never stopped loving you either, Dad." He nodded, emotion making further words impossible. We resumed dancing, no longer needing to speak. The reception continued into the night, transforming from a celebration shadowed by absence to one brightened by unexpected reconciliation. My mother eventually relaxed enough to teach Jason's relatives a traditional dance from our homeland. Jason's father engaged my father in conversation that gradually shifted from polite small talk to genuine interest. Two families, hesitantly beginning to become one. As Jason and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, my phone rang once more. Aunt Lydia again. Grandma? I asked immediately, fearing the worst. Her condition has stabilized, Aunt Lydia said, her voice reflecting cautious optimism. The doctors are surprised. She's asking about the wedding. Relief flooded through me. Tell her it was perfect. Absolutely perfect. I will. Oh, and Sophia? Your mother just called to say they're coming straight to the hospital from the reception. Together. I caught my breath, understanding the significance. My parents, continuing the process of reconciliation even after the wedding was over. Thank you, Aunt Lydia, for everything. As we drove away amid a shower of flower petals, Jason reached for my hand. So, he said with a smile, not exactly the wedding day we planned. No, I agreed, thinking of hospital rooms and family secrets, unexpected appearances and grandmother's wisdom. It was infinitely better. The garden pathway seemed impossibly long as I began my solitary walk toward Jason. Each step felt weighted with emotions, joy at marrying the man I loved, sorrow at the absence of my family, worry for my grandmother lying in a hospital bed across town. The guests rose as the music swelled, their faces blurring through the veil covering my eyes. I focused on Jason waiting at the altar, his encouraging smile pulling me forward when my steps wanted to falter. This was still our day. Our beginning. I straightened my shoulders and continued walking, trying to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. Halfway down the aisle, a commotion at the back of the venue caught my attention. Whispers rippled through the crowd as heads turned toward the garden entrance. Thinking perhaps a late guest had arrived, I continued my careful progress, determined to maintain my composure. Then I heard it, my name, called in my father's distinctive voice. Sophia. I turned, heart racing, unable to believe my ears. There at the garden entrance stood my father, dressed in his finest suit with traditional embellishments from our homeland. His face held a complexity of emotions I couldn't fully decipher from a distance. The music continued playing as I stood frozen, unsure what was happening. My father approached slowly, his steps measured and formal. When he reached me, he paused, something vulnerable in his expression I'd rarely seen before. May I? He asked quietly, offering his arm in the traditional way of our culture. Words failed me. I managed only a nod, afraid that speaking might break whatever spell had brought him here. As he took his place beside me, I noticed movement in the back row, my mother slipping into a seat, dabbing at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. Your grandmother can be very persuasive, my father whispered as we resumed walking. And very wise. Relief and joy washed through me in equal measure. I squeezed his arm, no words adequate for the moment. Jason beamed from the altar, understanding without explanation the significance of what was happening. When we reached the front, the officiant asked the traditional question, "Who gives this woman to be married?" My father's voice was steady as he answered, "Her mother, and I do." He placed my hand in Jason's, then added something I never thought I'd hear, the traditional blessing in our native language, words passed down through generations of my family. The ceremony proceeded in a dreamlike state. Jason and I exchanged the vows we had written, promising to honor each other's backgrounds while building something new together. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the garden erupted in applause that seemed to bridge cultures, generations, and misunderstandings. During the reception, I finally had a moment alone with my father. What happened? I asked, still processing their unexpected appearance. What changed your mind? Not what. Who? He smiled faintly. Your grandmother happened. I don't understand. After you and Jason left the hospital, she gave us quite the lecture. He looked almost amused at the memory. She reminded us of our own wedding day. How her disapproval nearly cost her a relationship with you. She said she would not allow us to make the same mistake. Just like that, you changed your mind? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. Not just like that, no. He looked down at his hands. We've been struggling with this for months. Your mother more than me, perhaps. He met my gaze directly. When your grandmother's condition worsened this morning, she made us promise. She said life is too short for such stubbornness. That sometimes traditions must bend so families don't break. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. And you agreed? We remembered how it felt to be young and in love, facing disapproval from those whose opinions mattered most. He hesitated. I still have concerns, Sophia. Cultural differences in marriage are not easy to navigate. But he glanced across the room at Jason, who was chatting animatedly with an elderly relative. He seems to be a good man who truly loves you. That is the foundation everything else can be built upon. Tears threatened to ruin my carefully applied makeup. Thank you for being here, I managed. It means everything. He cleared his throat, clearly emotional himself. Your grandmother also gave me an ultimatum. She said if we didn't attend your wedding, she would remove us from her will. His lips twitched in an almost smile. Not that it mattered. We were already on our way when she said it. Across the reception hall, my mother had cautiously approached Jason and appeared to be engaged in actual conversation. The sight seemed miraculous after months of rejection and silence. Later, during the traditional father-daughter dance that I had assumed would be skipped, I finally asked the question that had been burning in my mind. Why didn't you ever tell me about your own wedding? That grandma and grandpa disapproved. My father looked surprised. She told you about that? I nodded. This morning. She said you and Mom married against their wishes. That grandpa refused to attend. He was quiet for several moments as we moved across the dance floor. It was a different time, he finally said. We came to this country wanting to give you a perfect image of our culture, our traditions. Perhaps we were afraid that if you knew we had once defied those traditions ourselves, I might follow your example? I finished for him. A rueful smile crossed his face. Ironic, isn't it? In trying to protect our culture by hiding our own youthful rebellion, we may have pushed you further from it. I'm not rejecting our heritage, Dad, I said gently. I'm finding a way to honor it while building something new. Just like you and Mom did. He nodded slowly. Your grandmother said something similar. She has always been the wisest among us. The evening continued with moments of awkwardness gradually giving way to genuine connection. My mother eventually relaxed enough to teach some of Jason's relatives a traditional dance from our homeland. Jason's father engaged my father in conversation that shifted from polite small talk to stories about their respective childhoods. The most surprising moment came during my father's speech, something I had not expected him to give. He stood somewhat stiffly, addressing the gathered guests with formal dignity. When Sophia was born, he began, I made a promise to protect her and guide her toward the best path in life. He paused, gathering himself. What I failed to understand until recently is that the best path is not always the one I would have chosen. Sometimes it is one she must discover for herself. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the crowd as he continued. Today, I have seen how Jason looks at my daughter. I have witnessed his respect for our traditions, even those he does not fully understand. My father turned to face us directly. In our culture, there is a saying, new branches strengthen the ancient tree. Today, our family tree grows stronger with a new branch. He raised his glass in a traditional toast, speaking the words in our native language before translating, May your roots grow deep and your branches reach the sky. As glasses clinked around the room, Jason leaned close to whisper, Your father's full of surprises today. You have no idea, I replied, watching in amazement as my mother approached Jason's mother, the two women tentatively beginning a conversation. Later, as the reception was winding down, my mother pulled me aside. There's something you should know, she said, her voice low. Your grandmother's condition, it improved this afternoon. Hope surged through me. Really? The doctors are sure. She nodded. They're calling it unexpected but significant. She was even sitting up when we left the hospital. A small smile touched her lips. She made us promise to take pictures to show her tomorrow. You're going back tomorrow? I asked, hearing the real question beneath my words. Was this reconciliation going to continue beyond today? My mother's eyes softened with understanding. We're all going back tomorrow. As a family. She touched the pendant at my throat, my grandmother's necklace. She told me to tell you she's not ready to leave yet. She wants to meet her great-grandchildren someday. The implications of her words, Family, future, healing washed over me in a wave of emotion. I hugged my mother tightly, feeling her return the embrace with equal fervor. "I'm sorry it took us so long," she whispered against my hair. "Stubbornness runs in the family." Along with strength and love, I added. "Those run in the family too." As Jason and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon, my father approached with something in his hand, a small, ornately decorated box I recognized from my childhood. He pressed it into my palm. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this today. It has been in our family for 5 generations." Inside lay a delicate gold bracelet etched with symbols of prosperity and fertility. "But this is meant for the family matriarch," I said, understanding its significance. "Yes," he agreed. "And someday, you will pass it to your daughter or daughter-in-law, along with our stories." His eyes held mine. All of our stories, including how her parents once defied tradition to follow their hearts, and how her grandmother's wisdom helped heal a family rift. As we drove away amid a shower of flower petals, Jason reached for my hand, his thumb brushing over the ancient bracelet now circling my wrist. "So," he said with a smile, "not exactly the wedding day we planned." "No," I agreed, thinking of hospital rooms and family secrets, unexpected appearances and grandmother's wisdom. It was infinitely better. The twist that no one, least of all me, could have predicted wasn't just my parents' sudden appearance at the wedding. It was the revelation that their own love story mirrored mine in ways I had never known. It was my grandmother's strategic intervention, using her illness as leverage to heal family wounds. It was the discovery that tradition wasn't a rigid set of rules, but a living, breathing entity that could bend without breaking, evolve without being lost. As we headed toward our honeymoon destination, I realized the real twist was that what had seemed like an ending, my parents calling my wedding an embarrassment, had actually been the beginning of a deeper understanding between generations. Sometimes the most powerful family traditions aren't the visible rituals, but the invisible patterns of forgiveness, growth, and love that repeat across generations, connecting us through time. 6 months after our wedding, I stood in the kitchen of our new home, carefully arranging traditional dishes alongside Jason's mother's famous apple pie. The dining table, extended to its full length, was set with a blend of items that told our story: my grandmother's embroidered table runner, wedding china from Jason's family, and hand-painted plates I had purchased on our honeymoon. "Need any help?" Jason appeared in the doorway, looking slightly nervous. It was our first time hosting both families for dinner, a milestone in our married life that felt both ordinary and monumental. "Just your calm presence," I admitted, checking the main dish for the 3rd time. "Do you think it's ready?" He peered into the pot, inhaling deeply. "Smells perfect. Just like your mom makes it." The doorbell rang before I could respond. "They're here," I whispered unnecessarily, suddenly feeling like a child again, desperate for parental approval. Jason squeezed my hand. "It's going to be great." They're family. Family. Such a simple word for such a complex reality. My parents arrived first, my father carrying a bottle of traditional spirits, my mother bearing a homemade dessert. The initial greetings were still somewhat formal, but lacked the tension of previous encounters. My mother immediately headed for the kitchen to inspect my cooking, while my father explored our living room, examining the photographs and mementos we had collected. "You've displayed the wedding portrait," he noted, indicating the large framed photograph on our mantel. The 4 parents gathered around Jason and me, an image of unity that had seemed impossible just hours before it was taken. "It's my favorite picture," I said honestly. He nodded, something softening in his expression. "Mine too." Jason's parents arrived minutes later, his mother Caroline embracing me warmly, while his father Robert clapped Jason on the back before offering my father a hearty handshake. 6 months ago, these interactions would have been unimaginably awkward. Now they felt almost natural, not entirely comfortable yet, but evolving. As we settled around the table, I marveled at the scene before me. My father and Robert discussing recent sports events. My mother and Caroline comparing notes on recipes. Jason catching my eye across the table, his smile reflecting my own wonder. "So," my father said during a lull in conversation, Jason tells me you're considering starting your own marketing consultancy. I nearly choked on my water, surprised he knew about the idea I'd only recently begun exploring. It's just a thought at this stage, I said cautiously. Your mother was an entrepreneur before we came to this country, he continued, surprising me again. This was a part of her history I'd never heard. She had quite the business sense. My mother looked embarrassed, but pleased by the recognition. It was a small shop, nothing special. She's being modest, my father insisted. She built it from nothing. Had 5 employees by the time we decided to emigrate. He turned to Jason's parents. That's where Sophia gets her business mind. Not from me, I've always been better with technical things. The casual acknowledgement of my inherited traits, and the pride with which he claimed them, felt like a gift. For so long, I had seen my parents as unified in their traditions and expectations, not as individuals with unique histories and talents that had shaped me in different ways. I didn't know that, Mom, I said quietly. She shrugged, looking somewhat uncomfortable with the attention. It was another life. But yes, I understand your desire to build something of your own. A small smile played at her lips. Perhaps I could offer some advice, if you would like. I'd love that, I said, meaning it completely. The conversation flowed more easily after that, weaving between plans for the future and stories from the past. When dessert was served, a hybrid creation featuring elements from both cultural traditions, Jason tapped his glass gently. We actually have some news we'd like to share, he began, glancing at me for confirmation. We had discussed waiting longer to make the announcement, but the moment felt right. I nodded, suddenly nervous again. We wanted you all to be the first to know. I took a deep breath. We're expecting a baby. In about 7 months. The table erupted in exclamations of joy. Caroline immediately began crying happy tears while Robert beamed proudly. My mother clasped her hands together in delight. But it was my father's reaction that surprised me most. He rose from his chair, came around the table, and embraced me fully, something he had rarely done even when I was a child. A grandchild, he said, his voice thick with emotion. What a blessing. Later, as the initial excitement settled into happy discussion of baby preparations, my father cleared his throat. We have been thinking, he said, glancing at my mother for confirmation. The room above our garage, we could convert it into a nursery. For when you visit. Or if you need help with the baby. The offer, practical and emotional at once, nearly brought me to tears. That would be wonderful, I managed. And my mother added, I would like to teach the baby our language. If that's all right with you both. We were hoping you would, Jason said without hesitation. We want our child to know both sides of their heritage. My mother nodded, visibly moved. I will start collecting the children's books I used to read to you, Sophia. And the traditional lullabies. I have some family recipes to contribute to, Caroline offered. Though I'd love to learn some of your traditional dishes as well, she added, addressing my mother directly. We could cook together sometime, my mother suggested, surprising me again with this overture of friendship. As the evening continued, I excused myself briefly, needing a moment alone to absorb the significance of what was happening. In our bedroom, I took out my phone and opened the photo I had taken yesterday, my grandmother sitting up in her recliner at home, remarkable recovered from her health crisis, surrounded by her cherished possessions. We had visited her weekly since the wedding, sometimes with my parents, sometimes just Jason and me. Each visit revealed more family stories, more wisdom, more connections between past and present. She had been right about so many things, not least her prediction that my parents would eventually come around. Everything okay? Jason asked, appearing in the doorway. I showed him the photo. Just thinking about how much has changed in 6 months. How close we came to a very different outcome. He sat beside me on the edge of the bed. Your grandmother knew what she was doing with that hospital drama. Strategic genius, that woman. I laughed. She denies it completely. Says she really was at death's door. Convenient timing though, he teased. The thing is, I said more seriously, I think she might have saved more than our wedding day. She saved my relationship with my parents. And maybe helped them heal some old wounds of their own. Jason nodded thoughtfully. Family patterns are powerful things. Sometimes it takes someone with the perspective of another generation to see them clearly. Speaking of generations, I said, placing a hand on my still flat stomach, what do you think this little one will make of their complicated family heritage? I think, Jason said, covering my hand with his, they'll be incredibly lucky to grow up surrounded by so many different traditions, stories, and perspectives. They'll have your mother teaching them your language, and my dad showing them how to fish. Your father explaining cultural symbols, and my mom baking pies with them. He smiled. And your grandmother telling them how she orchestrated their parents' wedding day drama. I leaned against his shoulder, taking comfort in his optimism. It won't always be this easy. We'll hit rough patches. Cultural differences that seem charming now might become friction points later. Probably, he agreed readily. But we've already navigated one of the hardest parts, bringing the families together. And we've got your grandmother's wisdom to guide us. Standing firm for what matters while remaining open to change, I said, recalling one of her frequent sayings. When we returned to the dining room, the conversation had evolved into animated planning for the baby's future. My father was describing traditional first-year celebrations while Jason's mother suggested contemporary alternatives. Rather than arguing, they seemed to be finding ways to incorporate both approaches. The child will have such richness, my mother observed, noticing my return. 2 cultures, 2 languages, 2 sets of traditions. And 4 grandparents who clearly planned to spoil them rotten, I added with a smile. 5, counting your grandmother, my father corrected. She's already talking about which heirlooms to pass down. As the evening wound to a close, I found myself standing between my mother and Caroline as we rinsed dishes, the 3 of us working in companionable rhythm. I never thought we'd be here, I admitted quietly. There were moments I feared I'd lost you both forever. My mother paused, hands still in the soapy water. I feared the same, she confessed. That our stubbornness would cost us our only child. Caroline placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Families are resilient things. Sometimes they bend almost to breaking, but with love and effort, they can heal stronger than before. Like bones, my mother said unexpectedly, drawing surprised looks from both of us. She smiled faintly. My mother told me that once, after a family argument when I was young. That family bonds can break but heal stronger, like bones. Grandmother and her wisdom, I said, shaking my head in wonder. Always the right words at the right time. 2 weeks later, we visited my grandmother in her apartment, now fully recovered and determined to remain independent despite my parents' insistence she move in with them. She sat regally in her favorite chair as we shared the news about the baby. Her eyes lit up with joy. The next generation arrives. This is good timing. You can't take credit for this one, Grandma, I teased. This wasn't part of your hospital bed scheming. She laughed, the sound remarkably youthful despite her age. Who says I can't? Perhaps this was my plan all along. Jason played along. The long game, eh? Orchestrating great-grandchildren. A woman must think ahead, she replied with a wink. Now, tell me how your parents received the news. As we recounted the family dinner, her expression grew increasingly satisfied. So they are truly coming together now. The wounds are healing. Thanks to you, I said earnestly. If you hadn't intervened. She waved away my gratitude. I merely reminded them of what they already knew but had forgotten. That love matters more than pride. That family is not about perfect agreement, but perfect acceptance. Well, I wouldn't call it perfect yet, Jason admitted. There are still awkward moments. Of course, my grandmother nodded. Healing takes time. The scar remains, but the pain fades. She leaned forward, suddenly serious. Remember this when you face your own challenges as parents. You will make mistakes. You will disagree about traditions and methods. What matters is not avoiding the conflicts, but how you heal from them. Her words stayed with me as the months passed and my pregnancy progressed. Our families continued their cautious, but steadily warming dance of integration. My mother and Caroline went shopping for baby items together, debating the merits of traditional versus modern approaches to child rearing. My father and Robert collaborated on converting our spare room into a nursery, incorporating symbolic elements from both cultures into the decor. When our daughter Liliana was born on a crisp spring morning, Both sets of grandparents crowded the hospital waiting room, differences temporarily forgotten in their shared excitement. My grandmother arrived shortly after, moving slowly but determinedly, bearing a small package wrapped in heirloom cloth. "For the newest branch of our family tree," she announced, placing it in my hands as she gazed adoringly at the newborn in my arms. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet sized for an infant's wrist, engraved with symbols from our cultural heritage alongside a newly added symbol, one representing Lily's American roots through Jason's family. "Something old, something new," my grandmother explained. "Like your family." As I looked around the hospital room, Jason beaming with pride, our parents cooing over the baby, my grandmother watching it all with satisfied wisdom, I realized we had created something precious and rare, a family bridging cultures, generations, and misunderstandings through the simple but profound power of love and acceptance. The journey hadn't been easy. There would be challenges ahead as we navigated raising a child with multiple cultural identities. But we had built a foundation strong enough to weather the storms. My grandmother caught my eye across the room and nodded once, as if reading my thoughts. In that moment, I understood the most important lesson of all. Family isn't something we inherit completely formed and unchangeable. It's something we actively create every day through our choices, our forgiveness, and our willingness to grow together. So what about you? Have you ever faced a cultural clash within your family? How did you navigate those challenging waters? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that family rifts can heal, that traditions can evolve without being lost, and that love truly can bridge the deepest divides. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful twist in your story is the one you never saw coming.